Start our meeting, please. Today's February 25th, 2020. This is the Santa Barbara City Council. We're going to do our Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Certainly. Councilmember Jordan?
Here.
Councilor Gutierrez not yet present. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon? Here. Mayor Murillo?
Here.
Councilmember Friedman?
Here.
Councilmember Harmon?
Here.
And Councilmember Gutierrez?
Present.
Are there any changes to the agenda, Mr. Casey?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we'll go to public comment. Everyone has 3 minutes up at the podium. Mr. Wofford, you're going to be first. Mark Marshall Wofford, Carolina Bate after you, Jessica Carr after her. 3 minutes. Go for it.
Okay, hello everybody. My condolences to the Corral family that ran the food pantry up at the City College. They're very dearly missed up there, and those people are finally trying to get together. But they're very dearly missed to that City College, and my condolences to their family. And furthermore, I've just got a little statement to read here. Okay, I've been in trouble since 2002. I did get a couple of DUIs back in the day, and I was also trusted to work at the county jail where I really blew it pretty bad. I did take in some marijuana to a so-called friend. No drugs or marijuana was ever found. I still did 4.5 months in a 12-by-8 with Northwest isolation. It almost killed me. The third DUI, it was a little setup. The sheriffs wouldn't even pull me over. They sent the CHP. Apparently they said I ran a red light, and I wasn't drinking or on any kind of drugs. That CHP officer, he felt so bad about this that when we got to the jail, he didn't take me in. He took me to the little trailer out back and let me drink water for over an hour. Till he said, you're going to be drinking, you're going to be clean? I said, yes, sir. Well, I didn't have anything in my system, nothing. But anyway, I still paid my dues for that. And let's see. Tell me, do you call this justice? Furthermore, I don't deal, I don't steal, and I don't kill or harm anybody. Can I please have my life back? Yesterday at the Wellness Center, I got in another little altercation. And I don't want any more trouble with anybody, okay? Can we just forget about all these bad things? My so-called friends and family have, I don't know, I've been told, been paid to ask me questions and whatnot. My own daughter claimed I told her I was gay, also stated that I was personally selling my body for money and drugs in Ventura. I have no life. If there is a decent young lady out there, please consider this opportunity. I can cook, and from what I've told, I'm not too bad looking and smell pretty good. I've got an engagement ring around my neck, okay? 320 Oceano.
Okay, thanks so much. Ms. Abate, come on up. And I forgot to make my announcement that this is the public's opportunity to speak to us on matters that are not on our agenda. Holly is in the back in the turquoise top. She'll make an appointment with us if you want to meet with us, and she'll also get you answers from staff. We can't really engage in conversations. Ms. Abate, you're going to use visual, and that's a privilege, ma'am, that I allow. So go ahead. Okay. Were you going to use the projector? Okay. 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak about the importance of protecting human life. Please read the overhead projector for the next 30 seconds or so, and consider attending the kickoff rally of 40 Days for Life.
Okay, we've read it, so go ahead, continue with your testimony, please.
Oh, okay. Some people are slow readers, and it needs translation to Spanish.
Oh, okay.
And I have
I
3
am
minutes.
a fast reader, but yeah, thanks.
Celebrate what has been accomplished to protect the lives of the unborn from abortion, as well as to peacefully and prayerfully continue to work to protect all future babies. We each began our lifelong journey at our earliest unborn moments. Unborn babies are human beings too, and have as much a right to life and to live as you and I. No one has the right to decide when another person's life should end. Abortion, physician-assisted suicide, and the death penalty interfere with something that only God decides when a person's life will end. Our job and the role of all public policies and laws is to protect, promote, and safeguard the health and well-being of all members of our community. No matter if a person is born or unborn, dying near the end of their life, or what they have done in their past, their life has meaning and value. President Trump, the most pro-life president we've ever had, was the first president in office to ever speak at the March for Life rally in Washington, D.C. You may wonder, why should you oppose abortion, worry, or care about a stranger, a woman and her baby, that you will never meet, talk with, or ever get to know? Because just as President Trump said in his speech, every child is a sacred gift from God. We are happy and joyful at the birth of each new person. Please consider attending and supporting 40 Days for Life, a pro-life event today at 6 p.m. in front of Planned Parenthood, 518 Garden Street, Santa Barbara. Thank you for being willing to listen and consider these ideas.
Jessica Carr, followed by Michael Baker, Phil Walker, Elsa Granados, and Michael. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and City Council, for allowing me to share a very exciting development at the Salvation Army. I'm Major Jessica Carr. This is Major Tim. My husband, we are the new leaders for the Salvation Army in town, and we're excited to be here. We came from San Bernardino, so we're really thrilled to be in Santa Barbara. That's all enough said about that town. Anyways, back in October, we expanded our food pantry, and our food pantry is located on near Turnpike on Hollister. So it's not our downtown Hospitality House location. It's actually out in a different part of town. We expanded it to be client choice. We were really excited about that, and our participation rate of the community increased. And now, beginning next Wednesday, we're super thrilled about this. We are going to have evening hours. Many families are working poor and still need a little bit of help, and they are working, so they don't have the opportunity to take advantage of the wonderful food that is given in Santa Barbara. And so we're just announcing new evening hours on Wednesdays from 5:30 to 7:30. We'll go to 8 if need be. So if there's any of your constituents that come to you hungry, but they're working or they just can't get to ends meet, please refer them to the Salvation Army out on Hollister, and we'll be happy to feed them in our client choice pantry that's expanded. So I just came to tell you good news. If you want a tour, come on down. Or if you want to tour a hospitality house, that's fine. Or just chit chat. Salvation Army, give us a call. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Carr. Thank you so much. Mr. Baker?
You know, Mr. Baker's my dad. That's okay, though. Michael Baker, CEO, United Boys and Girls Clubs. First of all, love the Salvation Army. You guys are a great organization. Appreciate everything you do for the communities that you serve. I have the honor of being the CEO for United Boys and Girls Clubs, and wanted to give you an update that the West Side Club, as I've told you before, is thriving, and encourage each and every one of you. I know we have districts now, so maybe it changes things a little bit, but they're all kids. Would love to see every one of you walk through the doors of the West Side Boys and Girls Club and get a tour and see what's happening on a daily basis. Very excited about the music program that we have there in partnership with Notes for Notes. We have kids who have a musical gift walking around our club, and they didn't even know it. And if it wasn't for the Notes for Notes program and partnering with the Boys and Girls Club, those kids would not get free music lessons. They wouldn't be exposed to a lifelong gift that they have, and a love of music. For that, one of the things that we do, obviously, we have special events every year. And our next big special event is actually happening in Solvang. I know it's a little ways away, It's a little distance, but it's a great drive. It's a beautiful drive, and supports the United Boys and Girls Clubs as an organization as a whole. And I have flyers here for our 3rd annual Corks for Kids events. It's our wine tasting and casino night benefiting the United Boys and Girls Clubs with an emphasis on supporting our clubs that are happening in the Valley, which is the fastest growing area in the county right now. But I will tell you again, and invite each and every one of you to please come on down to the West Side Club any day, Monday through Friday, including Saturdays as well, but you can Monday through Friday ideally between 4 and 6, and you will see a ton of kids engaged in activities and surrounded by the incredible staff that I'm fortunate enough to work with. So thank you very much. Give these
Thanks.
here or
To Ms. Gorman.
There we go.
Thanks. Thank you. Mr. Walker, there you are.
I wasn't hiding in here, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council. I had the occasion yesterday evening to attend a Groundwater Sustainability Agency scoping meeting with I call it the City of Montecito, with the Montecito Water District Board in attendance too. It was quite interesting, but it was quite complex, and they had a DWR, Department of Water Resources lady laying out all the groundwork that's going to be involved, and it was beyond me to take it all in. But the one good thing I picked up from it, okay, former Councilman Benny White was in attendance, and you know, the east side of Santa Barbara especially and Montecito are like, there's a symbiotic relationship going on. Okay, I had an occasion to briefly talk with Mr. Floyd Wicks, the president of the Montecito Water District Board, and he said it's getting very close to inking the contract for the desal deal, so that's great. And I voted for that in 1990, and plus state water, and the more redundancy you have, the more backup, all the better for it. Also, there was 2 of my former coworkers at El Estero were featured in this past week's edition of the Montecito Journal. Mr. Perry Cabugos, he was nominated by the Tri-Counties for Maintenance Technician of the Year, and Mr. Mark Chiarlo was nominated for Operator of the Year. So, you know, I've had the privilege to work with these 2 gentlemen, and it's great to see them being recognized for their abilities and performance, and it was a very plus. It makes me feel good having even trained Mark for a number of months on shift to see him go that route. But he does have an engineering degree from the University of Pennsylvania, and he wanted to get in at the basement level, so to speak, and get the practical, real-world work experience. So it worked out great. Thank you.
Very good. Ms. Granados, followed by Michael Wren Strong, and the final speaker will be Josie Donnelly.
Good afternoon, Mayor Murillo and members of the council. My name is Elsa Granados, and I'm the Executive Director of Standing Together to End Sexual Assault. And my presence before you here is for 2 requests, please. And the first has to do with our change in name. I've been walking neighborhoods in our community, and because I'm a candidate for the 37th Assembly District, and in doing that, it's become very clear to me that still many of our community members do not know about the change in our name. And I want to make sure that we don't lose not one survivor to seek services because we've changed our name. So I'm going to ask if each of you would make a commitment to tell 3 people by the end of the week of our name change, people in your lives that don't know of our name change at this point, and then ask them to do the same. And I would ask the same of members of the public. And one of the reasons why we changed our name is because we wanted to make our services more inclusive of men. And men have been encouraged to come forward as a result of the high-profile cases of abuse through clergy in the Catholic Church and also through the Boy Scouts of America. And whether or not men have been abused through those entities, they still feel encouraged to come because they see role models of people coming forward, of men coming forward with their stories. And so I wanted to say that because last week, the Boy Scouts of America announced that they were filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And that's under a lawsuit, about 300 lawsuits from men who have been sexually abused. And I want to bring attention to that because I don't want to lose focus. I know that the Boy Scouts of America has done a lot of good, but we can't forget the trauma that has been experienced at their hands, at the hands of this organization that has been shown time and time again that they covered up the incidents. So I want to make sure that we have policies in place and that those policies are honored so that there are no more new cases of sexual abuse. So I would ask that, here's my second request, and that is that I would ask that each of you use the high-profile nature of your positions to remind all of us in the community that we need to support survivors and keep a focus on that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Michael, you're next. I'm sorry? You'll be the last one then, and it goes to Mr. Casey. Michael? And make sure that microphone is on.
Can you hear me? Am I heard? Wonderful. Today I will be holding and reading from the Bible for these 48 that have passed away in this area of homeless. I will start with prayer and then I will read Beatitudes. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Lord, give us this day our daily bread and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those that have trespassed against us. And allow us not to be led into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thy is my kingdom, my glory, and my grace in all things. Hallelujah, Emmanuel. I'm in Matthew chapter 5. And seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain. And when he was seated, his disciples came to him. Then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you, and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how shall it be seasoned? It is then good for nothing but to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. So let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. Blessed are all those that die on the streets. Blessed are all those that are preyed upon. Please make it a priority to take care of our homeless. In Emmanuel's name. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Mr. Strong, there you are.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. How's it going? Constituents, people at home. I know usually I talk about everything under the weather, the manipulation of the weather, 5G, which is coming up, Verizon. I'm going to still speak about it, obviously, because it's part of my life is to obviously expose the lies that we've been told. So I'm grateful I'm off of the Milpas corridor. I'm really looking forward to one of these days having conversations with, not just one-on-one, but with all of you, as what we need to have dialogue. I'm grateful. So I want to speak about some of the things I've been doing. I'm a landscape designer, a permaculture designer. We planted, actually, if Guinness Book of World Records around, we actually planted food and herbs behind a pharmacy in Cayucas, California, Soil Harmonics. Yeah, so we wanted to grow food locally, and this is about healing the land that has been raped, pillaged by this imperialist, corporate, capitalist, exploit, enslaved life system. Political, big CEO, big pharma, big oil, the ones at the top, and who's playing. So I'm your jester. I'm the one who's going to be doing the dance for you guys. So, and this gentleman who had great, thank you for your words, your prayers, and yes, absolutely, for those that have been unjustly, the rights, their human rights have been disrespected. And by the way, from last week, you said to respect your laws, but what about the Almighty and who created life's laws? Those go over your laws. So I'm grateful, by the way, and you need to remember that. And you guys work for us. You guys are our employees, okay? But people have forgotten and we need to claim that, and we need to rise up and see through new eyes that we're being lied to. And even in these organizations, I appreciate those that are working really hard, Salvation Army, and those that are the worker bees, but they've been lied to too. So where all this money is going to, the Parks and Rec, he's not here anymore, or the Boys and Girls Club of America. But speaking of the Boys and Girls Club of America, how about we transform that National Guard armories across America, which is what I've been speaking, across America, to create super community centers for the kids. And so I'm going to be speaking about the 5G, so I have later, but I want to help pick up trash and plant accordingly and get paid, and for all houseless people. Thank you.
So Ms. Donnelly, you wanted to speak on item 15. Okay, so you'll have to wait. Thanks for that. And Ms. Van Dyke, you're speaking on, there you are, number 3. So you have to wait till we get to that one. Okay. So that closes public comment, and we'll go on to our consent calendar. Ms. Clerk, you have some items to read. Thank you.
Item 2, introduction of ordinance approving the 2019 through 2021 Firefighters Association Bargaining Unit Memorandum of Understanding and adoption of resolution amending resolution number 19041, the position and salary control resolution for fiscal year 2020. Recommendation that Council A, ratify the Memorandum of Understanding between the City and the Santa Barbara Firefighters Association by introduction and subsequent adoption of, by reading of title only, an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara adopting the 2019 through 2021 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Santa Barbara and the Santa Barbara City Firefighters Association, and B, adopt by reading of title only a resolution of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending resolution number 19041, the position and salary control resolution for fiscal year 2020, affecting the salaries of classifications in the Santa Barbara City Firefighters Association, effective March 3rd, 2020. And number 3, introduction of ordinance for license agreement with Verizon Wireless for deregulated wireless installations on city streetlights. Recommendation that Council introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara approving a license agreement with Verizon Wireless, doing business as AirTouch Cellular, for deregulated wireless installations on city streetlights, including authorization for site-specific licenses.
And would you read number 6? We've had a request for that one as well.
Yes, item 6, contracts for habitat restoring, monitoring, and mitigation services for the Gutierrez, Koda, and Mason Street bridge replacement projects.
Okay. Ms. Harmon, did you wanted to say something on item number 3, which is the license agreement with Verizon Wireless?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Okay.
I just have a couple questions. Is now the right time for those questions?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam
Thanks.
Mayor. First, Mr. Colon, I guess this is for you. My first question is just generally about this contract, and then second, 5G specific. So on the first point, if I'm understanding the agenda memo correctly, the FCC requires that we remove regulatory barriers to installation of these small cell towers in public right-of-way, and therefore we sort of have to enter into a contract like this. Is that generally correct?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Harmon, let me defer to Mr. Doimus from my office, who's handled this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Doimus, go ahead, please.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Harmon. The FCC has created a system where we are required to allow small wireless facilities or even large wireless facilities to be installed in cities. The license agreement gives us some regulatory control. It also gives us control in terms of cost recovery. And we also have, last year, developed an ordinance for aesthetic requirements and all this. So if we don't have a license agreement, we don't have regulation on this issue. So that's what the purpose of doing this is for. We are also bringing a ordinance forward in terms of more adoption, more regulation on wireless facilities. There's current cases going on, so the goal of the ordinance is to be flexible with the results of some of these cases, but to be up to date as to the current law and standards at this time.
Thank you. Well, you may have just answered my next question, but I'll ask it anyway. I am not comfortable that 5G is safe, and I'm not sure of the health and safety impacts it's having on our community, and I'm concerned that this contract doesn't necessarily give us the power to regulate that, or maybe it does, and I'm hoping you can speak to that. I know it says there's no immediate plans to deploy 5G, but I'm concerned about giving up our ability to regulate it in the future by moving forward with this contract.
Sure. There's two ways to regulate. One is the license agreement that talks about in terms of the responsibility of maintenance of poles, how the process goes about in terms of applications, et cetera. In terms of regulation of maybe health standards, where it could be located, that would be more appropriate in actual ordinance regulations. And so what the goal is to have an ordinance in place to deal with eventually the 5G rollout. Like I said, right now there is no plans, but it could be coming in the next year or 2 years. And so where you would see stronger regulations that would apply to all wireless carriers, whether they want to enter in a license agreement or not, is through the ordinance. But we also feel a license agreement gives us additional regulation in regards to this.
Okay, so we're not giving up our capacity to say no 5G in our city, for example, by entering into this contract. In fact, we're doing the opposite, giving ourselves another tool to regulate. We're
giving another tool to regulate, but we also are in some ways. The issue is, in some ways, we could potentially be, and that's why we're keeping abreast of the situation constantly, because we could be hamstrung. We may not have the ability to say no 5G, period, and that's through, the FCC and the federal government. We're trying our best to regulate as much as possible in keeping with those guidelines.
I just don't want to give it up from the start, is what I'm trying to get at. So I understand we may not have jurisdiction.
We have 2 public comment speakers, so let's keep this part to questions, and then we can give our opinion after? You're good. Okay. Mr. Jordan, your light's on? A different item. Which one? Okay, number 5. Okay, we try to go in order. Okay, so let's go to the public comment. Ms. Van Dyke, you're up, and then Ren Strong.
Good afternoon, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Kimmy Van Dyke, and I am a member of the 5G Free Santa Barbara group, who is focused on public safety and in the process of building awareness around RFR, also known as radio frequency radiation. This can also be referred to as EMFs, standing for electromagnetic fields or frequency. Since going deep down the EMF rabbit hole last summer, I have read many articles, reports, studies, websites, and watched countless video interviews, documentaries, and testimonials on this subject. 5G is the 5th generation of wireless technology, small cell wireless infrastructure being installed at a rapid rate across the world and right here in Santa Barbara. Wuhan City, China, is one of the first cities in the world to have installed more than 10,000 5G base stations by the end of 2019. 5G is touted as the best thing since sliced bread by Verizon, all telecom companies, industry lobbyists, mainstream media at large, and our own Federal Communications Commission, also known as the FCC. All mentions of harms have conveniently been avoided at all costs, and a narrative has been created that there is nothing to worry about, even though there is literally thousands of studies showing how this invisible radio frequency radiation waves are detrimental to the bioelectric human being that we are, in addition to our bees, our trees, and every living thing in our environment is affected. This dangerous invisible electrosmog is accumulating from many sources, such as Wi-Fi, smart meters, cell phones, wireless devices, Bluetooth, cell towers, and is on top of the already harmful 2G, 3G, 4G, and now 5G that is emitting from electrical poles, streetlights, fake palm trees, sides of buildings, church steeples, flag poles, and other hidden sources with absolutely no warning to the public. Is it not interesting to know that the firefighters have an exemption from the SB 649 from 2017 to not have cell towers on or near their fire stations because it made them sick? Doss Williams is here with the firefighters, and I think this is something that should be brought up to everybody that's being on the voter roster for this upcoming election and see what their stance is on this, and they should be educated. I am here. I understand Verizon is here seeking funding or something to do with 5G and the street lights in our city. I am here to strongly oppose any further installations in Santa Barbara, and in fact, I demand a moratorium. We have a meeting this Wednesday evening at the Carr Palace at 6:30 if anybody would like to come. 5gfreesantabarbara.org. Get up on our sign up on our mail list. And this is something really important. This is happening across the world. People are standing up and fighting back against this non-ionizing and ionizing radiation that is filling and layering in our environment.
Thank you for your comments. Your time is up. We don't allow clapping or booing, Mr. Strong. Nobody's going to clap or boo for you, so come on up.
I don't mind if they do.
I do.
At least I'd get some reaction.
3 minutes, go ahead.
I need to put this on. Do I get 3 minutes?
Yeah, well, go ahead, please.
Can you start me at 3 minutes, please? Thank you, ma'am. I know this isn't fun, is it? I know it's not fun for me either.
Go ahead.
So when we got, by the way, thank you, Kimmy, for speaking. Thank you. This is really not about EMF, electromagnetic. This is about weaponry. This is about military, microwave, radiation, millimeter weapons. It sends it out, okay? So when SB 649 with Governor Jerry Brown, when people are trying to get this to be passed, no public. Here. Okay. Oh, there we go. There we go. So this is what, if you guys are at home and you guys here want to stay quiet about this genocide, ecocide, because they got to cut trees down, by the way, to put this stuff up, and they're already pushing it. So for you guys to accept on this stuff or not, you don't need to sign any contracts. You need to be human beings. You need to be for we the people and for the earth. And if you guys keep doing this, I'm telling you, it's going to get worse. The consequences, your reliability, your soul is going to be on the stand at some point. So I can't keep doing this. I'm here to help heal the land and each other and the earth, okay? I pick up trash. Thank you for the Rangers leaving the people alone, the houseless people, not homeless, houseless. There's a lot of vacancies here, but you guys want to keep cutting down trees and keep build. It's like this is. I might be crazy to be here, but you guys are insane for pushing this agenda. You guys are the sick political system here locally, all the way to the White House. So if we can't transform and have it safe for us and our environment, and we can't have law enforcement and those that are protecting us and supposed to be, and Firefighters, Dan Warren, my good friend, I was his best man at his wedding. It's sad I get ignored. Everybody's staying quiet. Nobody wants to talk about this 5G when they're still pushing it. So I don't know what you're signing or what you're not going to sign, but please show up, people. Please get involved. Please say no. If you love your kids, your grandkids, and those that didn't know about this corruption, were fooled. They worked their asses off. They worked their lives to death for you. And you're not saying anything, shame on you if you do. But we can change, and you can change, and you got to do it now.
Time is up. Mr. Strong,
Now.
thanks for your comments. So the floor is open on item number 3. I do know, Mr. Kalan, that you've had a meeting with the representatives from the folks that are concerned about 5G. Sir, let us know what happened.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. So on Friday the 14th, Mr. Doimus and I met with representatives from 5G Santa Barbara, and our purpose in doing that was to learn from them what kinds of authority they thought the city might be able to bring to bear on small cell facilities. The concerns they expressed were very specific, that additional radiation is harmful to children in particular whose skulls are not fully formed. And secondly, they expressed concern about radiation near medical facilities where there's already quite a bit of radiation happening. Now, from my standpoint, we're all ears, and we advise them, as I'll advise you right now, that when we do return with a more restrictive regulating ordinance, we'll lay out your options from the toughest to the least tough. Having said that, SB 649 is pretty specific in preempting the city's ability to say no to small cell installations on the city's poles. So it is true that we are making the best of a situation that the state legislature and FCC have crammed down our throat, so to speak. Having said that, also, you should be aware that one of the application requirements the city is currently enforcing is this. It's a radio frequency emissions compliance report, and it requires, I'll read, it must make specific references to the proposed location and configuration of the installation. The report should include site-specific calculations which show the project meets the FCC's standards for radio frequency radiation exposure limits. The report should also provide recommendations for proper mitigation for any potential impacts to health and human safety where applicable. These recommendations shall be reflected in the project plans. So the regulations that were adopted about a year ago go as far as we think we can go right now in trying to get at the health concerns, and we're committed to come back to you with more information as it becomes available.
Okay, questions for Mr. Kalan? For Mr. Doimus's remarks, I understood that this is giving us some regulatory authority if we go forward with item 3. Ms. Sneddon, you had a question or a comment?
I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor. What happens if we don't enter into an agreement? What is the contract binding us to or not binding us to?
Mr. Doimus.
Mayor, Councilmember Sneddon, if they don't, then they still have a right for applications, and so then we would be dealing with site-specific issues, and there would be really starting from scratch. We wouldn't have any parameters, anything else in terms of how we would go about negotiating this cell site, this location, anything else. So part of this is us taking control in terms of dealing with cost, locations, commingling of small wireless facilities on a pole, what happens after it's removed, how it's removed, whose responsibility it is, the cost for that. So that's all laid out in this, because if we don't have anything, then it's kind of up in the air. So that's the purpose of trying to take at least one step in regulatory control over the installation of it. There are, and I mentioned earlier, the separation of having more restrictive requirements through the actual citywide ordinance dealing with that. That's a separate issue on that.
Mr. Hendel, did you have something to add?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sneddon, Adam Hendel, Principal Engineer in the Public Works Department. I think Mr. Doimus and Mr. Colon summarized this very well. I would also add that what this is a license agreement to attach to streetlights. So there could be small cell facilities that aren't attached to our streetlights. Staff think that this is the best way to do this to minimize the visual impact. And so this license agreement defines all the terms and conditions upon which that attachment occurs. So that's really what the council is approving today, is this license agreement to allow for the attachments rather than a small cell facility maybe on a standalone pole or something like that. So we think that this helps minimize the number of poles in our city.
And then a follow-up question too about the environmental review. Could you give more detail about that portion?
With any proposal, there's a couple things we look at. We look at both this health and safety. So we do it. They have to do in terms of my understanding, basic in terms of science, at least in emissions tests to show the radiation level, to show it's acceptable on that. So it meets that threshold. They have to do that for each installation, as well as they have to show the aesthetics of each installation, that we have these requirements that would blend in for the environment. So with each small wireless facility installations, those are some of the automatic requirements from that. And that's essentially the environmental review in terms of showing that it meets certain radiation standards for that level that the FCC has kind of guided us on.
And then, I just will state also that I'm opposed to 5G. I don't want it in our community. Is accepting this contract, it's a 20-year term, what does that lock us into?
It only locks us into, here are the requirements in terms of how you're going to install them on our streetlights or our poles. It doesn't talk about in terms of regulatory or us saying no. That's not what this agreement is designed to do. That may be done through the ordinance in terms of changing certain restrictions. Maybe in terms of after we look at that, maybe we have certain locations where we restrict or the amount. But there is a recognition, and there's a recognition, to be frank with the council, that 4G, in order for the distinction between 4G and 5G is the number of small wireless facility cells. In order for it to work, it requires a much greater concentration, and we're aware of that. And so that is something that we will have to look to regulate. There's a case currently in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals dealing with some of these issues in the cities to be able to fight back on having some health and safety, police power, regulatory control over these issues. So it's not just, it's affecting every city nationwide on this issue.
And then just one more question. Are there any communities that are just not cooperating?
Not that I'm aware of locally. There is, like I said, San Jose with different cities have filed an appeal trying to take greater control over it. Like, I think we recognize it'd be very hard standard to say completely no to it, but at least having certain controls over where they can be located or populated. The issue I think will come to a head is because the wireless providers are going to say we need more of these throughout a city. And so that's where I think where it's the fork meets the issue, the crux of the issue is going to be in terms of numerous small wireless facilities needing to be installed in cities trying to take control of not having the whole city overpopulated with them.
And if we went that route, I'm not saying we would or not, but would having this contract in place hurt that case?
I view the contract as simply as in order to install the facilities, these are the requirements, this is what you have to have in place. It doesn't say if you can, doesn't talk about rejection, it doesn't have anything where the city automatically has to allow for this site or anything like that. It talks about when you do install a small wireless facility, these are the steps that are needed to do in terms of the pole to install it there, to remove it, everything else. It doesn't talk about in terms of have any regulatory framework outside of that. This is getting control of the actual process, the liability of who's, in terms of the installation, the work to be done, whose responsibility, how are they going to hook up to potentially city networks, or how they're going to commingle with other small wireless facilities, because there's 4 major carriers, and the FCC favors allowing small wireless facilities to be commingled instead of having each carrier and one pole. If you can put it all in one pole, it'd be better for a city. So they recognize that fact. So that's what this contract allows us to do in that regard.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Jordan, questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'm confused in that second to last paragraph in the staff report about budget and financial information. So the legislation sets a limit on what we can charge an applicant for both going through the process that we're going to define and for placement on a pole, right?
Correct.
And as a result of that, we're on the hook to potentially make that a full cost recovery process. It's not the legislation or somebody else.
Correct,
So
Councilman.
they come in with a hack application and go through several design review processes that eats up staff time and resources and clearly blows through that $270. We're on the hook for that, and there's no recourse to get that back.
So our standards of how we have developed at least the initial cost are based on the anticipated mean or average time for community development staff from Public Works in terms of their hourly rates and the cost of reviewing all these things. If there is, and that's probably one of the reasons why we want to have these guidelines, so we won't come around and have those problems of having someone come in and not knowing the process and just taking longer and longer periods of time and frustrating the entire process where it's running up costs. But if there is a consistent basis of a company continually using an exorbitant amount of staff time to get like one small wireless facility in, potentially that's where we have the conversations with these carriers saying, look, your work product is not up to par. You're costing us greater. We're going to have to, look at the rates and probably increase them or deal with that issue. So that's part of that ongoing conversation. If that
Is this
occurs.
an over-the-counter process?
Councilmember Jordan, this is not an over-the-counter process. I would elaborate a bit more on what Mr. Doima said. We have existing design guidelines that staff use to review these applications, and we have a fairly thorough application that if we get an incomplete application from a carrier, one of their applicants will reject their application as incomplete, which would minimize staff costs. And then the second part of that question was?
Well, so if it's across the street, does it go before HLC?
No, it does not. It's a ministerial review,
Okay.
And staff, both in Public Works and in Community Development, review the applications.
So I'd call it over-the-counter.
It's not over the counter,
Yeah, but I get it.
But
Yeah.
it is ministerial.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Friedman. Question?
Yeah, I do have a question. Getting to the $270, this is a 20-year contract, so would it be $270 in 20 years from now?
No, there is in the contract in terms of allowing.
Okay, so
the
there
rates
is an
to change.
inflationary.
There is an inflationary.
Okay.
mechanism.
And then my other question, I think you answered it, is that without entering into this, there could be actually more poles throughout the city that would have these types of facilities on them, but this allows us to concentrate them on poles. Or I'm trying to understand what the benefit is, because if we do have a benefit of this, of at least putting them in fewer locations, that would be helpful for the public health aspect. So can you just clarify for me if that's the case?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Friedman, I don't know whether having an agreement in place or not will affect the amount of applications, but it does allow it to be, and that's the point. They will come regardless if we have this contract or not, but it allows it to be for us to have regulatory control over it and have an orderly process and to oversee it and to have terms and agreements and responsibilities that are laid out that are contractually agreed upon. I don't know if it would increase or decrease. I would imagine their need to have small wireless facilities in the city, they would come regardless, and whether we had it or not.
But it doesn't, not the number of applications that come in, but the actual number of locations. We're trying to concentrate them on city poles, so there would be more of an incentive to put them in fewer locations. That's where I'm getting at is, say, whatever the number is that they're coming in with, rather than having 1,000 different poles, we could put them on city poles, so you would reduce to the number of locations rather than having one pole, you've got like 3 or 4 on one pole.
The hope is that would be the process that would occur, especially with the commingling of poles and allowing one pole to house 3 or 4 small wireless facilities. That would be ideal.
And that's within what we're doing today is the incentive to put multiple on one pole.
That's not technically the entire basis of the agreement. The agreement, again, is to have a process and system in place for to do so, and they have to follow the city's process, and that's taking our control that we have in place right now. But the hope is that these in our conversations with a lot of the carriers, they also recognize the ability to commingle and want to commingle poles as well. They can, and I don't know if that would help in terms of feeding off each other. I don't know if they would feed off in terms of the actual wireless facilities in some way connecting, but it's something that commonly occurs, and the FCC has rules that really, in terms of approval process, favor commingling of poles or small wireless facilities in the public right of way.
Right. Thank you.
Ms. Harmon, sorry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I have one question. Maybe, Mr. Doimus, you can answer it. I understand there's sort of 2 parts to this. There's the license agreement ordinance, which sets up how these small cell facilities can be installed, and then the regulatory piece, which, as far as we are allowed to under federal law, will determine our rights to say, no, not here. I guess what I don't understand is why we're doing the license agreement piece first. To me, it makes more sense that we would set up the regulatory ordinance first and then define how the process of getting these small cell towers installed would work. So I'm wondering if you could answer whether there's a reason we went about it this way.
That's an excellent question. Madam Mayor, Councilmember Harmon, the FCC has really, if you look where the ordinance, we had a proposed ordinance in 16, and looking at that ordinance and where we are now with the law and where we are with the technology, it is it's changed drastically. The biggest thing, of course, now is that a lot of these companies are going with small wireless facilities instead of having large wireless facilities you would see on hilltops. And the FCC has created regulations and have constantly changed moving the goalposts along through the entire time. They're shortening shot clocks originally from 90 days to 60 days when it has to be from application to permit in hand. And one of the biggest things that we had to scurry on to kind of address your question was the aesthetic guidelines, that we essentially had 3 or 4 months to even get aesthetic guidelines in, otherwise we would lose that control. And so that was the first step we took last year, is getting these aesthetic guidelines to have control in terms of how they look and how they blend in the community. And so with that, we see the law changing. So they're coming, they're processing the application. There are companies that do the installation where cities have violated the shot clock. They have brought litigation on it aggressively. Our goal is that we know that is to first have at least a license agreement, a process in place of how the application process works, how the installation works. We do have the aesthetic piece in there. We have at least that in place. Now looking at the law, we've had time to at least breathe and look back and see how the law has developed over the course of the years, is to look to see where our city attorney, Mr. Kalan, said, where our bring back options to the city council, where our regulation can go in it, in terms of maybe the most restrictive, pushing that envelope, to a moderate, to in terms of how we want to regulate that. That has taken time. It will take time, but I think we need something at least in place to have at least control of how you're going to install these things. Because if we don't have that, then it's just going to be potentially a case-by-case basis of how these are going to be installed. And if we frustrate that performance, we can be opening ourselves up to litigation on that process. So this is one step in 2 steps in terms of how to get that control. I don't think having an ordinance in place would affect this license agreement, because that deals with at least the application process, the cost, how it's taken down after maybe 10, 20 years of use, how that looks about. I'm looking at more of the regulatory framework of an ordinance in terms of locations, everything else like that. And maybe even adopting changes to the aesthetic requirements and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Alejandro Gutierrez.
This message is for Mr. Colon. My biggest concern is where these poles will be, and most of the time, I'm really concerned about my district, and especially because my district is a population that normally doesn't get involved, and this for me is already confusing. And I also want clarification. It says between 20 and 60 small cell facilities within the city. Are those the poles we're talking about?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Gutierrez, this agreement only affects city streetlight poles, and what the staff are saying is that in order to avoid new poles or using electrical poles that someday we want to have underground, they'd rather have the industry use streetlight poles. Under the state law, these small cell installations are a permitted use, meaning we can't say no. And as Mr. Hendel said, it may not be over the counter, but we have a ministerial obligation if they meet 3 requirements. So we've tried to add to those requirements as much as we felt comfortable with last year with the public right-of-way standards that Mr. Hendel mentioned. And we'll do more with the ordinance if possible. But again, the basic framework here is the state and federal government are saying we establish what the health standards are. If the facility meets those requirements, we don't have a choice on whether to allow them at this point. Where we have some control is on aesthetics, and the legal issue will be how can you use aesthetic control to address some of the health concerns that are also potentially there. And we'll bring that to you in the form of an ordinance. So this measure is trying to limit the number of new poles by using existing street light poles. And Mr. Hendel can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Mr. Hendel.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez, City Attorney Colon is correct. In your district, as the Council Agenda report said, Verizon has said somewhere between 20 and 60 small cell facilities throughout the city. All of those may not be attached to city streetlights. There may be some locations where they get attached to existing utility poles because there are no streetlights in that neighborhood. But in your district, there are a lot of city-owned streetlights, and staff have identified streetlights, like mid-block streetlights, as good candidates to have shrouded antennas for aesthetic concealment. But with that number, 20 to 60, let's say 30, maybe there'd be half a dozen in a particular area. So I think it's staff's goal that this would get kind of deployed in phases. And I think a lot of the carriers have actually been doing that as well. So from a standpoint of how this would impact neighborhoods, I think it'll kind of be a slow rollout process.
Yeah, my concern is that District 1 has a lot of streetlights compared to other districts. And for me, that's very concerning.
Well, Mr. Hendel, it's not, they'll install them according to the need, not so much that they won't over-install them because that's not useful to the purpose.
Madam Mayor, that is my understanding. That sounds correct.
Okay, so Ms. Gutierrez, you won't get more just because you have more streetlights. We'll keep order in the chambers, please. Okay, so let's vote on this separately. What I'm understanding is that this gives us some regulatory authority. An ordinance is going to come to us, Mr. Kalan, in 6 months, and you're working with the people who are concerned about 5G on that. Is that right? So did you have a sense of when it would come to us?
It will go to the Planning Commission first, and no, I don't. I'm sure that the 5G Santa Barbara will give me their draft very shortly.
Okay, so we're working on an ordinance, and so we're voting on this one part of it today. Mr. Gutierrez's light is on, so I'll stop my, I'll just stop my rant. So go ahead. I'm just trying to set up the vote, but go ahead, Mr. Gutierrez.
Just wondering, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering, is it possible to postpone this item?
I'll need to talk to Mr. Hendel and Mr. Doimus. The concern is that they do have regulatory another sports metaphor, sorry, shot clock that compels us to act quickly. And my worry would be a wave of applications with a very short shot clock deadline resulting in real disorderly installations. Having said that, I defer to Mr. Handel.
Mr. Handel?
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez, one potential option here could be that to introduce this item this week and have staff make a presentation prior to adoption next week. I would also point out that we do have existing license agreements already in place for this subject. There's a license agreement currently in place with AT&T for this subject, as well as a right-of-way use agreement with Crown Castle. So this isn't something we don't already have in place, but we could discuss this further on adoption.
So you're saying this is an agreement with Verizon, but we have agreements in place already with other providers?
That is correct.
Okay. Well, I could go ahead and put forward the staff recommendation and see if we have 4 votes for that to move it forward. Mr. Friedman, you have a suggestion?
I was seeing are you making a motion to put the staff?
Yeah,
forward?
let's try that. Let's see what happens.
So I'll have a second on it and just make a comment.
Go ahead.
So I appreciate the suggestion on delaying it a week, but my thinking is that this enhances our regulatory oversight. The longer we wait and don't have it, the less oversight we have. That last bit of information that we already have these agreements with others, we should have it here. We're going to come back with an ordinance that will address these major issues, that will have that full discussion on it. I just think the fewer regulations have, the worse off we are on this, so I'll be supporting the staff recommendation.
Okay. I will too. Let's go ahead and take a roll call vote. And if some of you just want to take a stand against 5G entirely and vote no, you can do that. I believe this is giving us some authority, temporary and important to this subject. Ms. Harmon, your light? No. Ms. Gutierrez, your light is on? Just by mistake. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to know, so it's off the table to vote to move forward today and get a presentation next week? There's no appetite?
If this
for
fails,
that?
you can make
Okay.
that motion. We'll take a roll call vote. Ms. Gorman, let's just go ahead and take this vote.
Okay. Councilmember Friedman?
Yes.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez? Yes. Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez?
No.
Councilmember Harmon?
No.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Snen?
Well, I would like to delay, so I'm not sure how to vote at
You would
this
vote no.
point. No, then.
And Mayor Maria?
Yes. So that's 4-3, and we'll move it forward. So thank you. The idea of your presentation, that would be incorporated into the ordinance presentation that we'll be getting. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Doimus, Mr. Kalan, folks from the audience, thank you so much. We're going to move to item 5. We try to take these items in order. Ms. Clerk, would you read number 5?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Fired and arrest. That's what you guys need to do.
Item 5, amendment to existing aircraft noise monitoring, flight tracking service, landing fee collection, and maintenance technical support agreement.
Mr. Jordan, you had something on this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Mayor, just a question for staff. I think probably continuing the theme of futility. As I'm sure you know, we get almost 1 million passengers this year at the airport. We've added airlines, and along with that, of course, has come both emails, I'm sure, to others sitting up here, but certainly to me, about increased flight paths of jets over neighborhoods, in particular turning onto shore on the Mesa and then hanging a left over parts of the Mesa and starting their approach, which doesn't really bother me, but I don't recognize that much happening from the past, and I hear it from that stretch all the way above, and then I constantly see the social media on next door on the same subject too. So just wondering if you could address this issue in terms of what your general noise tracking does, and if there is a light at the end of that tunnel where you can use that noise tracking to resolve increased airline traffic over neighborhoods.
So, Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Jordan, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Aaron Keller with the Airport Operations Division. And yes, excuse me, you're absolutely correct. There has been an increase in the number of flight tracks over the area to the east of the airport and to the west, respectively, as weather conditions dictate. I am happy to report that with the existing technology that we have in place, it is a integrated noise modeling technology approved by the FAA for the intent of these studies, and it's something that you'll note in the staff report advises that we've been using since early 2019. Within that, we have not seen an increase in overall noise activity. And when I say noise, I mean the actual measured community noise equivalent level for the neighborhoods to the east and to the west of the facility. But I will also share with you, as you have heard, I believe the numbers were a 24% increase in flight activity or passengers, more specifically in calendar year 2019. In January alone, we've also seen a 36% increase in traffic in month over month from last January. So while we haven't seen it yet, that's what this tool will allow us to do, to continue to vet not only the existing technology that we have, but give us the physical infrastructure in place to ensure that the FAA's noise modeling that we are using is accurate.
Let me say what I thought I heard. So it's not necessarily, in your opinion or your tracking, more noisy. It's just more frequent. Does that sound right?
That is 100% accurate, and if anything, it's actually to the contrary, where we've had a decrease in physical measured noise when you look at the California weighted average for noise equivalents in the area.
And the people who are bothered by the level of noise, the tracking that we do would eventually, if that was to rise to a level of greater annoyance than numerically, that would be like a push-up tool to give to the FAA to make a decision on whether it was too noisy or not, right? We don't actually, the airport per se, doesn't that actually control the acceptable noise level or the acceptable flight paths for planes leaving or coming to the airport. Is that correct?
That is correct. The airport has the authority for the safety on the ground of the movement of aircraft. Once that aircraft departs or is inbound, we have no authority. That rests with the pilot in command and the FAA at that point. FAA defines nuisance noise at a level of 65 CNEL. I will report, based upon the most recent contouring, that noise level exists only within the physical perimeter of the airport, and more specifically right at the midpoint of the primary instrument runway 725.
Okay, very good. I just thought it needed some intelligent discourse on that, so thank you for being here. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. And so we'll do number 6. Mr. Phil Walker had asked us to pull this. You still here? This is the contracts for habitat restoration, monitoring, and mitigation services for the Gutierrez, Koda, and Mason Street Bridge replacement projects. Come on up. Go ahead.
Real quick one, Madam Mayor. Hopefully the environmental restoration, mitigation, and the contract works out very well. My wife's family home is on Lower Canada in the Punta Gorda area where they redid the Punta Gorda Bridge. The bridge is great. Unfortunately, the environmental company that did the restoration planted sand willows. And I had the occasional, probably half a year ago, to talk to a lady from County Flood Control, and she equated what has happened to Sycamore Creek is the war of the willows that happened in the San Ynez drainage a number of years ago, I think from the Lompoc area up. But apparently the sand willows, all it takes is a small fingernail-sized piece of the bark, and they will regenerate a critter, a bird can transport it. And if you walk sometime from Punta Gorda to even, the bridge at Mason Street there, it's choked. And you want that groundwater, what little there is, it's very minimal right now with dry times ahead, and I can see it. You want it to percolate down into the riparian aquifer. You don't want it to evapotranspirate up into the air. The other quick thing, I remember from the Painted Cave fire, I call it the riparian flame wave. It came down the fire came down San Antonio Creek in the creek bed and jumped into the San Antonio Village neighborhood. So you got a dual-edged sword problem there, and hopefully it won't go that route. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good. Do I have a motion to move the remainder of the consent calendar without further reading? Ms. Gutierrez?
I actually have a question on item number 8.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want a little bit more information for the public on this recommendation on item 8.
Which item?
Sorry. Item 8, increase a professional service contract with the confidentiality inquiry and specialized investigation.
Let's have the clerk read that item, number 8, please, Ms. Clerk.
Certainly. Number 8, increase in professional services contract with confidential inquiries and specialized investigations.
So my question is, if you can give us a little bit of a background of why the increase of $25,000.
Madam Mayor and Councilmember Gutierrez, we have seen a huge cost increase in the background investigations that we do on our sworn and civilian employees as a requirement to employment in the police department. So this is an additional contract that will allow us to look at other agencies, background agencies, to continue to hire people. So it's just a cost of, unfortunately, doing business. The cost has hugely increased with the demand throughout the entire nation, actually.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. If there's no further objection, we'll waive further reading. And is there a motion to move the consent calendar forward minus number 3?
So moved.
Second.
That was Harmon Jordan. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're done with the consent calendar, and the Finance Committee met today. Mr. Friedman, is there a report?
Yes, we reviewed the mid-year financials and some adjustments, and we've approved them and forwarded them on to City Council for approval, which will come, I believe, next week.
Very good. We'll move on to item number 13. Ms. Clerk, what's that?
Item 13, introduction of ordinance authorizing the City of Santa Barbara to join the California Choice Energy Joint Powers Authority as an associate member. Recommendation that Council A introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing the City of Santa Barbara to join the California Choice Energy Authority Joint Powers Authority and the City Administrator to execute an associate member agreement and administrative services agreement for ongoing administrative services commencing upon the delivery of electrical service by Santa Barbara Clean Energy, and B, accept the proposed logo for Santa Barbara Clean Energy.
Very good. Ms. Parenteau, if you're ready.
Yes, good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. I'm excited to present to you an update on Santa Barbara Clean Energy, particularly for the new members on the dais. I'll provide a little background of what we're talking about today. And then the meat of our presentation is the California Choice Energy Authority Joint Powers Agreement. Authority. Apologize. And so we'll go into really the nuts and bolts of how that works and how it could benefit the city and SBCE. I am Alelia Parenteau. I'm the city's Energy and Climate Program Supervisor, and sitting here with me is Ms. Connect from the City Attorney's Office. We also have Ms. Boswell from the California Choice Energy Authority, who's here to provide additional support if needed. So just a quick introduction to today's agenda. We're going to do, as I mentioned, some CCE review and the logo reveal. We're very excited about this. And then we're going to jump into the CalChoice JPA, provide some updates on next steps, and follow up with our recommendations. So I presented this slide at our last presentation to you, and I think it's important to reiterate. You will hear me use the terms CCA and CCE interchangeably. They mean the same thing. One, community choice aggregation is the more technical term used by regulatory bodies in legislation. We find community choice energy a more user-friendly term, more intuitive to the layman, and so we use that more commonly in our vernacular when we talk about this. They mean the same thing, however. Next is my 3 key facts that I shared with you last time I was here as well, and I wanted to reiterate them. CCE is all about choice. Our current constituents only have one choice when selecting electrical service, and that's Southern California Edison. With CCE, they will have 3 choices, and that will be to stay in to the CCE program's 100% renewable energy default product. They also have the choice to opt down to a lower renewable energy content product that will still be higher renewable energy content than SCE, but at the same price as SCE. Or they can choose to opt out altogether. So all of a sudden they have choice in electrical service. Additionally, the city is not proposing to take over the poles and wires. There are 2 different service types when it comes to electrical service. One is procurement of the electricity, which the CCE will take over, and one is delivery of that electricity, which Southern California Edison will continue to do. They will also continue to bill our customers because they have the metering infrastructure in place, and we'll work together to make sure that our bills are accurate. My 3rd key fact is that these are opt-out programs. That was the enabling legislation that allows CCE programs to exist, wanted to set them up for success. So they said any service area that starts a community choice energy program will have all of its constituents defaulted into the program. And this is really because they don't think that people pay a lot of attention to their electrical bills, and so if they didn't get automatically defaulted in, they may not make the choice to join. However, as I mentioned before, anyone can opt out at any time and remove themselves from the CCE program. For those of you who are more visual learners, this is how CCE works. In the green, we have the source of energy, which is what the CCE or Santa Barbara Clean Energy will be taking control of. And this is choosing where our power comes from, eventually potentially building electrical supply either locally or elsewhere. And then the gray is what the utility still handles, which is the delivery of energy, maintaining the poles and wires, and billing the customers. And then in the orange is sort of the benefit, if you will. Our constituents get to benefit from local control. Our council gets to decide where the revenues are spent and what programs are created and how we want to set generation rates. And that's what we see as the benefits. Here's a really simplified timeline of the process so far. In July of 2019, the council voted to move forward with the city-only CCE. We immediately began work on an implementation plan that needed to be filed by December of 2019 in order to launch our CCE in 2021. So we got that implementation filed in November, and it was just recently certified at the end of January. So we are officially a community choice energy program, which is very exciting. We are currently where this red arrow is pointing you to, and that's today, considering joining the CalChoice JPA. And then the ensuing year and a bit will be really putting in place some regulatory requirements that I'll go over in a minute, procuring power more in the 2021 end, and then launching. Once we filed that implementation plan, we had a sort of quick clock, 90-day clock, that we had to get these 4 items completed, and that's a financial security deposit with the California Public Utilities Commission. That deposit just holds some money in case we do decide to fold our CC at any point, and it covers the cost to returning those customers back to Southern California Edison. That's complete. We've also completed a service agreement with Southern California Edison for providing those billing services where they generate the bills and crunch the meter data, if you will. So that's complete as well. We had to file a preliminary renewable portfolio standard procurement plan. The renewable portfolio standard is the state requirement of renewable content in energy portfolios. And so we just had to say that we were going to meet that mandated minimum. Since we're defaulting in our customers at 100% renewable, we meet it by default. And then lastly, we just had to provide a document that showed we understood the required information that needs to go out to our customers during our noticing period, which again will happen in 2021. And so this template really wasn't a final version of any of the notices. It just showed the information that we will be including as mandated by the California Public Utilities Commission. So all of these things are done. We met our requirements. the logo. We're really excited to show you. We've been working hard with our PR firm who's helping us market the CCE program, and we wanted to pick something that really represented Santa Barbara and what we're trying to do through the CCE program. So without further ado, presenting to you Santa Barbara Clean Energy in all her glory. So I'll let you dwell on that for just a sec. And then we'll move into the California Choice Energy Authority Joint Powers Authority. All right, so CalChoice, as I will refer to it from now on, is a JPA that allows members to collectively leverage existing service contracts with consultants. It's truly an administrative relationship. It provides, again, access to these experts and various services that we would require as an operating CCE. It does provide some herd immunity and economies of scale by leveraging this collective group of city-only CCEs. But it's really important to note that our CCE maintains its absolute authority and autonomy on the things that we really care about, which is where does our revenue go, how do we set rates, what kind of power are we buying for our constituents. A little background, CalChoice was born out of the city of Lancaster after they launched their own city-only CCE and had neighboring jurisdictions be really interested in their process and want to leverage some of their expertise. They currently have some active members that have already launched CCEs, and that includes the City of Lancaster, San Jacinto, Pico Rivera, Rancho Mirage, and Apple Valley. And then they have additional members who are in the process, similar to us, of getting ready to launch their CCEs, and they're listed here. CalChoice is a bit of a unique JPA in that the board is the City of Lancaster's City Council, and the city manager of Lancaster is their executive director. This is an unusual arrangement. Usually it's a combination of the members, but for now this is how theirs is constructed. And it's really important to mention the limit of the board's authority. The board is only authorized to select the contractors with whom CalChoice has contracts and what the budget for those contractors is, and if new members can join or members need to be removed from the JPA. The city absolutely approves all power purchase agreements that CalChoice presents to it prior to entering into the agreements. So in no way does the board get to decide whom we buy power from or for how much. Additionally, the city has a separate financial lockbox which provides protection. So if another city that is a member of the CalChoice JPA were to default on their energy procurement contract, our general fund is 100% protected from that. In terms of the term and exit of the agreement, the JPA term is 3 years or the longest energy contract that we enter into with CalChoice as a signatory. However, the city can choose to leave any time after that base term of 3 years. What that would mean is that we would have to work with CalChoice to negotiate and assign those contracts that we have in place, but we have added provisions to the bylaws and the templates that will happen in a timely manner. Additionally, we would need to provide CalChoice with ample time to unwind any agreements that they've entered into on our part, including some shared agreements with the other members. We've decided that that's approximately 90 days. And then the city would need to pivot and hire its own service providers because we can't really operate the CCE without the same set of experts. Conversely, should CalChoice decide to fold or terminate the city's membership, the process is relatively the same. We would negotiate and assign the existing contracts. We would need to hire service providers, but ultimately operations would remain pretty much the same. We would just have to hustle to get those new service providers on board. I wanted to touch a little bit on the CalChoice group of consultants' experience. They have been instrumental in launching 6 existing city-only CCEs, and they are comprised of a set of really expert consultants. And I sort of point out some examples here below my expert consultants bullet, including Bayshore Consulting Group, who is actually comprised of staff from the city of Lancaster who formed the original city of Lancaster CCE. And beyond helping these 6 single city CCEs launch, they've also helped people outside of the Southern California Edison territory, such as Solana Beach and the newly formed Clean Energy Alliance, form and operate. Additionally, I wanted to just call out 2 examples of other consultants that are on the roster, and that is Pacific Energy Advisors, who worked with us to develop our pro forma when we were first studying this, and provides a lot of data analytics and load forecasting and assistance with the energy procurement itself, and Calpine, who provides a lot of data management and call center operations support. These 2 alone, they cover 80% of the existing CCs throughout the state. So this is really the cream of the crop of experts that we immediately have access to. So I just wanted to give that for a little context of who we're talking about when we're entering into this JPA. So what we're here to ask you for today is to enter into the associate membership agreement, which is attached to the JPA's bylaws. The bylaws really define or create the operations and function of the JPA, and they do things such as defining the mechanics for adding or removing members, setting procedures for terminating membership, creating financial protections for all of the members themselves, establishing approval requirements, including our very unique approval requirements in Santa Barbara for any contract that we would enter into for energy procurement. That is clearly stated in the bylaws. And the associate membership agreement is what explicitly joins the city to the JPA. So that's one thing in our recommendation today that we're asking you to consider. With that, we're bringing to you the administrative services agreement, which is really the terms and conditions of the CalChoice relationship. It's how we have access to the fees. CalChoice services are really, CalChoice services are really separated into 2 types. There's the fixed fee or shared services, which is really more administrative. It's legal, advocacy, regulatory affairs and advocacy. It's the CalChoice administration itself of the JPA, which I want to mention here. A portion of that does go to the city of Lancaster because they provide city clerk services, some additional administration through their board process. Staff has reviewed that amount that goes to the city of Lancaster, and we find that it's appropriate, but I just wanted to make sure you were aware that that is in there. And then CalChoice really does a lot of third-party relationship management between us and Southern California Edison, the contractors, and the regulatory bodies, which is a pretty heavy lift. The reimbursable services are sort of where you actually pay to use them. And so the energy procurement services, the contracting process, finding the energy vendors, rate analysis and load forecasting is a big lift on that too. And then data management and call center operations. For the first 2 in that series of services, they're really based on how much of anything we're buying, right? And how many transactions we need to do. For the data management and call center operations, it's a fixed fee based on the number of meters we serve. So if we have less opt-outs than anticipated, it will be a little bit higher. If we have more, it'll be a little bit lower. And that's how they calculate those. So speaking of dollars, these are the only dollars we're going to talk about today, and this is the cost associated with what we've brought to you today. So reimbursable professional service fees are estimated at $270,000, and that's a good assumption based on what we anticipate our membership will be. Data management and call center is about $420,000 per year. And again, that's based on the number of customers we anticipate having when we launch. And then fixed fees, I have an asterisk here because I have it at $260,000. But because a bunch of new cities are joining the JPA, those are anticipated to go down rather significantly. So we're looking to save about $100,000 on those per year, which is exciting if everyone moves through their process. So some things I really wanted you to consider when bringing this presentation to you is that if we join CalChoice, we're able to develop and operate our own CCE quickly using this established expertise. We won't need to hire any full-time employees in order to launch, which is a good thing and a savings because CalChoice will be fulfilling that function for us. There are some economies of scale, as I mentioned before, by leveraging the other smaller cities' energy needs, and then we'll have access to those existing contracts and contractors. The only caveat that I would really mention is that we don't have input with regards to the consultant selection, since that is a City of Lancaster City Council decision. However, in our discussions with CalChoice and the other existing associate members, it's become clear that CalChoice really does a lot of legwork to make sure that everyone feels fully informed and involved in that process of decision making. And so there's not really any surprises, and there's plenty of opportunities to provide feedback. And so we felt pretty comfortable with that setup. Of course, I should mention the city could do this without the help of CalChoice, but we would be time constrained. There would be a lot that we would need to learn and do in a very limited amount of time. We would very likely have a duplicate contractor roster. As I mentioned, these are sort of the experts that we would want to contract with. We would likely need to add additional energy program staff to help manage not only the RFP process for those contractors, but the ongoing contract management with those contractors. And if I'm being quite honest with you, we have done a lot of work in the last few years to learn a lot about CCE, but we still have sort of insufficient existing in-house expertise to really feel like we're putting our best foot forward on our own. I did want to mention that we already have a relationship with CalChoice. They have done some work for us in our process so far, including updating our pro forma with the city-only scenario, and they put together our implementation plan and followed it through the regulatory process. We also entered into, in January, a phase 2 agreement with them that will cover us from January through to launch, because there's a number of requirements that need some oversight. And so we've entered into that with them already, so they will support us through that phase. And that what we're asking you for today is really from launch on, an ongoing support. So with that, I'm going to briefly touch on next steps and then get to our recommendation. So our first next step is coming right up, and that's our Earth Day launch. We're really excited that we've worked with the Community Environmental Council to celebrate their 50th anniversary of Earth Day with our inaugural CCE marketing campaign launch. This will be the first time that we've really interacted with the community in terms of our new program and what it will mean for them. And so we're really excited about that opportunity. We will have our own booth at Earth Day, and so stay tuned for opportunities for you to engage with your constituents there. And this will really focus on community choice energy background and benefits for city residents and businesses, and what this means for them and why we're doing it. And so we're rather excited about that. The more technical next steps are that we have a few more plans that we need to file, and the CalChoice group will be helping us with this. And that really includes things like the year ahead resource adequacy forecast. Resource adequacy, I want to explain just really quickly because it's a term you'll hear come up a bunch. The state has mandated that as a state, we need to have enough energy generation capacity in the ground to meet the state's load. And how they've made sure that happens is they assign an allocation to every load serving entity, which includes investor-owned utilities like Southern California Edison, and CCAs like the new SBCE. And we basically just put in an investment. We have to pay into an insurance plan, if you will, that helps develop new energy generation assets throughout the state. So we need to forecast what our allocation of that will be and put some contracts in place within the next year. We also need to update our renewable portfolio procurement plan, where we're going to get all of our renewable energy from. We need to put together an integrated resource plan, which is really saying what kind of sources we're going to use as a whole and throughout the year. And then we're going to bring back to you soon some financial structure agreements. And these 3 agreements are really what set up this general fund's protections and keep an arm's length relationship between the energy procurement contracts and our general fund. So these are rather technical, but important. So with that, I'm going to move into our recommendations, and I apologize for the lengthiness of this first one, but I will read it out for you. Introduce and subsequently adopt by reading of title only an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara authorizing the City of Santa Barbara to join the California Choice Energy Authority Joint Powers Authority and the City Administrator to execute an associate membership agreement and administrative services agreement for ongoing administrative services commencing upon delivery of electrical service by the Santa Barbara Clean Energy Program. And please accept our logo for Santa Barbara Clean Energy. With that, I'll take questions.
Councilmember Snedden has a question, or Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A question, since this is such an exciting day, but some of the benefits of having the local control, as you mentioned too, were helping decide where the revenue goes and maybe incentivizing programs. So I have one question, if you could maybe give us some examples of the types of things we might use that revenue for. And then the second part of the question is, I know we had discussions about this in the subcommittee meetings, but rates for lower income energy users, and will they expect their rates to go up, or what will be the impact for those users?
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Sneddon. I will tackle your second question first. Thank you for bringing that up. So currently, Southern California Edison offers several low-income qualified programs, and we have made, or I apologize, your council has made a decision, and a past decision, to maintain those discounts. So all current enrolled or future enrolled that are eligible low-income constituents or customers will maintain that same discount rate. For your second question, what some examples of programs that really a wide variety of things, and it will be up to the discretion of council to decide how we want to use those revenues, but there's a number of ways that we've sort of forecasted that we would use them, including rate relief to the customers, including things that help with the greenhouse gas emissions reductions for the city, so incentivizing alternative transportation, including electric vehicles. It would be the building of, potentially the building of energy generation assets around our community to improve resilience and reliability. And those are just some examples. We could provide incentives for people to put solar or battery storage at their businesses. And as I mentioned in the first place, or rate relief, we could always reduce rates for our customers. So there's sort of a number of avenues you can take with this revenue, and we anticipate that we'll be able to do multiple of these.
Thank you. Is this, do we have public comment? Is it time for comments also, or just questions?
Let's save our comments. Mr. Friedman and Mr. Jordan have their lights on, but I will note that Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon and Councilmember Friedman and I are on the subcommittee for community choice energy. Go ahead, Mr. Friedman.
Thank you. Those were some of the questions I had, but one for the public in particular. We mentioned it, but for those who don't want to participate in this, they can opt out and they would just have their service continue as normal.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Friedman, that's correct. So anyone who chooses to opt out of Edison or out of SBC prior to launch would see no change. If they are defaulted in and then opt out, they would likely have to wait a few months, because it takes Edison a few months to reconcile that opt out, but then they would be returned to Edison as a customer.
Okay, thank you. Just a very important point for those who might not want to participate in this program. And that was all factored into the financial pro forma that we participated in, or that we conducted, sorry.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Friedman, that is correct. We actually took a very conservative approach on opt-outs. We went much higher than we've seen anywhere in the state, just to ensure that this was a feasible plan for us.
Thank you, and I'll reserve my comments till after questions.
Okay, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So kind of on that whole opt-in, opt-out thing, this is a honeymoon question. First couple months, I'm trying to avoid going back and looking at 2 years' worth of meetings. But have we done any actual structured polling on what you think the Mike Jordans of the community are going to do once they get this, or are we just using what you've seen in other communities as a template?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Jordan, we have not done specific polling to the community. What we have looked at is similar communities to ours, especially communities that have defaulted in at 100% renewable, what their opt-out averages have been. And to be honest, they're about 8%, and we modeled 20%. So we felt like that was a conservative enough approach to be safe.
Okay. And then on that question, I think that I heard Ms. Sneddon ask too, on part of the plan allows us to have some resources to do things we want locally, right? And I'm assuming at the nuts and bolts of that, really, if I'm opting in at 100%, I'm choosing to both pay for increased cost of green supply of electricity, but I'm also choosing to opt in to providing dollar resources for these local items that are in excess of my my electrical service too, right?
Councilmember Jordan, that is sort of correct,
Okay.
yes. What we prefer to look at it as is currently those dollars are going to Southern California Edison
Okay.
and their shareholders. And so we're sort of reallocating
Okay.
that excess profit to our community. Yes, the members that stay in at the 100% renewable electricity default are paying a slight premium, but much less than they would if they were to put 100% solar on their home. So we
Okay.
think it's actually a pretty good deal for our customers. And again, they have the option to opt down, still get more renewable electricity than
Yep.
Edison, and pay the exact same amount.
So one of them is a personal choice to pay a little more for better energy sourcing, and the other one is just a reallocation of where my money was already going to the local level rather than off to Edison, right?
Right, correct.
Okay. And then Mr. Casey, just a weird question because, there's, I don't know, 50 pages of a collective bargaining agreement in here for a consent item, but there's no copy of this ASA. Is that just because? I don't know why.
Councilmember Jordan, I think it is available in the clerk's office for review, as is, I think, the policy now. Typically, they don't get copied in full with the council packet, I believe.
Okay. Thanks.
There's no public comment, Mr. Casey, which surprises me, as we've had in our subcommittee meetings a lot of participation, as Ms. Parento said, from the Community Environmental Council, the Sierra Club. These bright graduate students have been coming and giving us their opinions, and it's been interactive. So anyway, no public comment. We'll go ahead and move to deliberative comments. Ms. Sneddon, you go ahead and start first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is such an exciting day to keep moving this forward, and I really have to commend Ms. Parento and your team, and for every little detail, and we had you come back subcommittee meetings with more information and then more information, and you've so thoroughly answered all of our questions. But I also want to give you credit for your initial concept with the logo, and I think it so beautifully represents Santa Barbara and what we're trying to do with clean energy and the choices that we're making, and your initial concept on that and seeing that to fruition. And I love the logo. I think it's beautiful and really represents us well. I am especially excited about our local control of as you said, reallocating that funding to our community, and that's one of the big reasons we chose to go this route in the first place, and especially some of those things that you enumerated and some we haven't even thought of yet as we have more and more progress in what we can do with our cleaner energy. This is such a critical issue for us to address climate change on a citywide scale, and to maintain but to further our goals in Santa Barbara and our environmental legacy. And this is everybody I talk to about, even if you do nothing, and next year all of our electrical sockets will be sustainable, green, renewable energy, and I'm so grateful for that. Looking forward to the public outreach. I know that was, I think, I really agree that that's an important aspect of this, that our Councilmember Jordans of the community and everybody have their questions answered and thoroughly vetted. And so looking forward to that and launching at Earth Day. And I'd be really happy to move the staff recommendation to join with California Choice Energy Authority Joint Powers Association, and also to wholeheartedly, enthusiastically endorse the logo that we are presenting.
Okay, very good. A second from Mr. Friedman. So go ahead and make your remarks, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Sten. That was very well articulated. So first, I'd like to thank our staff, Ms. Parento and Ms. Connect. You've both been instrumental in getting us through this very difficult process. If you could just pull up the logo, I want to keep it up there as long as we can while we have this item on. So this is very, very cool. I'll start there. With the logo, it just captures everything we're about with Santa Barbara Clean Energy, and that is our coastline there. And it's great visual for us and what we're trying to achieve here. For me personally, this is a exciting day. I've been working on community choice energy since 2006 when I worked at the county, and the first discussions came back when I worked for then Supervisor Salud Carbajal. And then due to the Great Recession, everything got put on hold, and then it came back, and worked on it for the last few years in office. A lot of fits and starts, and then came here and got to finish it up. So it's kind of see everything come forward is just really rewarding, and the persistence of so many people that have made this happen, including our community organization partners as well. Just briefly, we're going to have the option of 100% renewable energy, and I think it's great in terms of the outreach that our first public event is on the 50th anniversary of Earth Day, where we'll be able to show that, hey, we're going to start using the earth for our energy, and all the solar and everything else that we can get on it, and eventually it'll help us go to microgrids and make our community more resilient, especially in terms of natural disasters and those type of unfortunate events that will have microgrids is one of our goals down the line. I also like to just say that a lot of thought and deliberation with my colleagues and our staff went into which model was the best for us. And as some might know, the remainder of the South County and Santa Maria and the county itself went with Monterey. And we considered that as well as others, but the ability to have our own local autonomy and our decision-making weighed heavily in what we wanted to accomplish here. And without Cal Choice and this new kind of JPA that we're going to be entering into, it wouldn't have been possible. But the research that we got and the confidence that we got joining Cal Choice really makes it possible, because we get the expertise that they have, which we wouldn't have had. Also the bulk purchasing for the energy, as well as the economies of scale on the information they're getting from the consultants and everything, really help us cost-wise, but also just having people who've, organizations that have been through it, and then the sharing of information. And we were able to analyze the experience of other entities with Cal Choice, so it's something that's been around for a number of years, so it wasn't a brand new entity, so we were comfortable with their track record. And then again, just keeping local control and our local programming is going to be huge for us going forward. And the other part of it is the promoting local jobs in clean energy. That's the other component, because when we have these projects, we can really try to revitalize and have that green energy workforce that we have here. And there's a lot of skilled individuals in this town. And this gets into our whole housing issue, is that we need to have high-paying jobs here in multiple different industries, and this will help us facilitate that and open up more doors for those living in the community to be able to afford to live here, outside of just normal tech that's coming in. So with that, I'm looking forward to the years to come and seeing this true fruition next year.
Great. Mr. Jordan.
Mayor, well, there's no way I can articulate this better than both of you guys did. So in addition to staff getting thanks, I think part of that thanks also has to go to Council Members Sneddon and Friedman for helping shepherd this through the whole process too, and not losing sight. Really the only comment I have is on this generation of local resources. And I think you need to, my worldview on that is, I think you should try and get out in front of that as much as possible in a manner that plays up to the positives of that, rather than that's just something found out a year or two into it and people want to twist it the wrong way. So to me, that's a great opportunity, among the other things you listed and Eric listed in particular, which should resonate, and that's local energy generation. So much more self-sustainability on a local basis, rather than even the really green stuff we're buying that's coming from 1,000 miles away over questionable transmission lines. And to me, I just don't know how anybody in the community could not appreciate that and buy into that whole scenario of both increased, a little bit of an increase on your bill for the source of the energy, and then a little bit of that reallocating what would have gone to Edison shareholders to stay here and to let us do as we really want to do stuff that apply locally. So I'll also be supporting this, and I think it's, again, great work from you two up here, along with great work by staff. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Casey? I don't see any other lights, so
Great.
go ahead.
Then before you vote, we're also super excited about this. This is really great. And just clarify for the record, the subcommittee was Madam Mayor as well as Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah,
Sneddon
Mr.
and
Jordan.
Mr. Friedman. They all did a really nice job.
That's it. The honeymoon's over.
That's
now.
okay, yeah.
And I just want to clarify, it's not on the agenda today, not looking for action, but I came up at Finance Committee today, and I kind of want to tie the link of where we're thinking of, and that is there are startup costs involved with launching this program in excess of about $2 million that we can recoup over time and reimburse ourselves, but we do have to identify a funding source for those startup costs. And at Finance Committee today was mentioned how we need to program the Edison settlement money. And so I think that's a great source to help fund the startup cost for community choice energy. And so we'll be coming back later with some recommendations about to do that, but I just kind of want to tie those two things together and then let you know that's one of the ways we're thinking and is a really good, seamless way, I think, to get this up and running.
Thanks. And before we take the vote, I'll point out Mr. Four was really involved. Mr. Bolton, right? Or no, I'm confusing him with the other subcommittee. Okay,
You're
so Ms.
confusing him with the
Parentone
Climate
was
Action
connect-
Plan. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I believe you're confusing him with the Climate Action Plan, which he's
Oh, the
heavily
Climate Action
involved
Plan.
with.
Okay,
Yes.
but on that note, the Community Choice Energy Program is a huge part of our climate strategy, resilience strategy here in the city. So we're doing the right thing, thank goodness. And we have a motion. Well, if you would put it back on the screen, then we'll know what we're voting on. Ms. Clerk, are
Is
you
everyone
good?
finished looking at the logo?
I'm sorry. Yes, the beautiful logo. So, Ms. Clerk, that was Sneddon Friedman on there, she's going a little slower. So it's to approve CalChoice and the logo.
To introduce the ordinance.
It is to introduce the ordinance. Thanks, Ms. City Attorney. Okay, if we're all clear, we'll take a roll call vote. Thank you.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez?
Yes.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez?
Yes.
Councilmember Harmon?
Yes.
Councilmember Jordan?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon?
Yes.
Councilmember Friedman?
Yes.
And Mayor Murillo.
Aye. So that's 7 of us. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you, staff. We'll close this item. And I think we can go on to the next one without a break. Does anyone need a break? Okay. We'll take a 2-minute break. Thank you.
Together a collaborative of agencies and individuals and organizations that are looking to better address homelessness in the city. And as part of that contract, they will be coming to you on a quarterly basis to tell you what has transpired. And with that, I will just be turning it over to Rich.
Mr. Sander.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council members, and members of the public. Again, my name is Rich Sander. I'm the Executive Director of SB Act. We're pleased to be with you here today just to report on what's happened this quarter since you first approved this contract item with our agency. Today, you have Barbara Anderson, our collaborative facilitator, who was formerly up here with the Santa Barbara Foundation. She was so moved by the work that we were doing that she came on board with us, and Jeff Schaefer, our Director of Initiatives. So just a brief overview. The collaborative, what will happen is that we have both a long-term and an immediate focus on the work that we're doing with homelessness. The long-term focus is the actual creation of what's called a common agenda. We're going to get into that a little bit later, but this is what that looks like. We have a steering committee that is focusing on working groups made up of partner organizations and community members. For the immediate term, we are working with what we're calling RAPs, or Regional Action Plans, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later in our presentation. The collaborative overview looks a little like this. First, we have our steering committee. The steering committee we're going to get into just in a second, but that is the agency that will not only create the common agenda, but is steering the working groups and the direction that we'll be headed as a whole. You have all-call partner organizations, which are all the other agencies that are involved in our work, which then go into working groups, regional action plans, and what we're calling a funder collaborative that will be newly created just in March. The steering committee provides guidance, vision, and oversight for the collaborative as a whole. They both develop and refine the common agenda. The common agenda is the means of which that just defines the problem that we're going to solve, the ways that we're going about it, and the timeline that we're going to do it. If we need any funding or anything else that is required of us, that is all figured out within the common agenda. The steering committee also tracks the progress of the collaborative as a whole, and it provides the leadership of the collaborative as a whole. It's the champion, they champion the common agenda, and they essentially lead the organizations and the community. So we're pleased to announce that we've had our first steering committee meeting, chaired by Mayor Kathy Murillo. We have 18 participating organizations in the steering committee. You can see of those 18 participating organizations, we have government agencies, nonprofits, businesses, philanthropy, and the target population, which are people who are actually experiencing homelessness. For a list of those steering committee members, you could see from government agencies, from the City of Santa Barbara, we have Mayor Kathy Murillo. City of SB is Laura Doubles. From the County of SB, Kimberly Albers. Housing Authority of the City of SB, Rob Fredericks. SB County Behavioral Wellness, Dr. Alice Gleghorn. And Santa Barbara Police Department, Lieutenant Kenneth Kushner. From the nonprofit agencies, we have Home for Good Santa Barbara County with Emily Allen. Cottage Population Health, Kathy Baslowitz. Path SB, Tessa Madden-Storms. Transition House, Kathleen Bashuki. New Beginnings Counseling Center, Christine Schwartz, and CityNet Bradfield House. From the business community, we have downtown organizations Carrie Kelly, Eastside Society Tino Agustin de Guevara, Plum Goods owner Amy Cooper. From philanthropy, we have representation from the Santa Barbara Foundation, Rubai Estes, Social Venture Partners, Glenn Batchelor, and then for our target population, person experiencing homelessness is Roger Powell. Now, each of these steering committee members, as I said, are working together to create the common agenda. We're here with Barbara Anderson, I want to bring up, who is our collaborative facilitator, and she's going to begin to talk through what the initial stages of the common agenda look like. So, Barbara Anderson.
Thank you. Ms. Anderson.
Hi. So I have the privilege of serving as facilitator of this incredible leadership group, as well as all of the partner organizations that are working to address the impacts of homelessness in the city of Santa Barbara. When we say collaboration, this is really unique. Our approach is collective impact, which is a research-based and evidence-based approach to formalizing collaboration, creating mechanisms for trust building, relationship building, as well as accountability to measurable goals over a designated period of time. So these are, jargony type terms, but I just want to walk through what they mean because they're very critically important. And this is part of the role and responsibilities of the steering committee, which again is the number of agencies that Rich just shared with you. So the principles are the guiding principles in terms of how we work and engage with each other, both at the steering committee level as well as all call partner organizations and the regional action plans and the working groups. Everything from respect to inclusivity to innovation. These were created at our first steering committee meeting and will be ratified at our next steering committee tomorrow. The problem definition is what we're trying to achieve, as well as what we're trying not to achieve, right? What are the root causes of the issue we're trying to address, and really providing a level of clarity, as well as from what we've heard from partners, something that's achievable and realistic in a shorter period of time. So this isn't a 10-year plan, it's not a 5-year plan. We want to make sure that we have achievable goals and that we're evolving the common agenda based on the needs and concerns of our constituencies. Then the goals are the measurable, actionable goals that we're trying to achieve with this collaboration. And the framework for change is how we're trying to achieve them specifically. So again, the goals can be broader, but the framework for change will be very specific. We want to make sure, again, there's a level of clarity and transparency in terms of what we're trying to accomplish, as well as the understanding and buy-in and engagement from the partner organizations that are doing the critical work. The plan for learning is continuous improvement. How we learn and engage from each other, with each other, how we learn from community members, community leaders, learn from all of you, and making sure that we're in that continuous improvement loop, and we're making adjustments as we go and as needed. So this is what we call the common agenda, which is part of the approach of collective impact. So as we start to create this common agenda, what is critical in our process is that we hear from everyone that's being impacted by homelessness, which individually and collectively in our neighborhoods, at all levels, businesses, nonprofit organizations, government agencies, but also hearing from our residents and those experiencing homelessness. So as we continue kind of these formal interviews, we've conducted 23 to date. It's nearly not enough. We had a great number of people show up at the first all-call partner meeting that have concerns, that have ideas, that have thoughts. We want to hear from every single one of them. But this is what we've conducted to date, and this is where the common agenda will start being framed. So what we're hearing, again, nothing new here in terms of increasing the number of shelter beds as well as increasing the number of affordable housing units. Also creating an achievable common agenda. I think concerns for those partner organizations that have been part of broader collaborations in the past is we need to make sure that this is doable and achievable with the capacity we currently have, as well as any increased capacity that we can facilitate moving forward. Strengthening capacity for advocacy. There's a lot of organizations that are doing education and awareness. That has been going really well. It has resonated with a large number of constituents. But how can we shift this to action? How can we make sure that we're showing up to advocate for local affordable housing solutions, advocating for partner organizations that are providing critical support services, as well as looking at new opportunities around things like prevention? And then the last piece, availability and flexibility of resources. I think we're in a wonderful time in that the concern and the crisis of homelessness has reached a level, we can say wonderful because it's increasing financial resources, right? But it's detrimental in terms of how we are working to leverage those and that there's still gaps. So what we're trying to do is understand better the avenues and the funding streams that currently exist, who's being supported by those funding streams, and how we can address the gaps with more flexibility and resources, usually around private philanthropy and engaging private philanthropic dollars to be able to address those gaps. So this has come up both in homelessness prevention, which is, can we help the family with the unexpected expense, the car repair, the medical expense, so that they can pay rent on time, to supportive services, making sure that we're providing enough services to retain people and individuals in housing and families in housing, and making sure that they're successful for the long term. So the 23 interviews, this doesn't include, we've reported on a partnership that we had with Westmont College about hearing from residents on the east side. We'll continue to engage residents in all of our neighborhoods about their concerns, everything from safety to are solutions doable, is everyone engaging in those solutions, not just one neighborhood, and reporting out to our all-call partners. So the steering committee, again, we've had one meeting so far. We have 18 participating organizations. Our next meeting is tomorrow morning. And we have a second agency representative for every individual serving on the steering committee. So again, we hope to have, and we're anticipating full representation tomorrow as well. These are the all-call partners. So you're very familiar with this list of organizations, but I think it's just great to see that we have a diversity of perspectives, diversity of sectors. We have a diversity of community leaders and community members coming together. We are grateful for the positivity. We're grateful for the optimism in general. We're grateful for the level of engagement. These are organizations that have been through a lot. They're continuing to show up. They're continuing to commit to the process. And they've helped us in terms of understanding better what we can achieve, understanding better what we can do for the city, and understanding what we can do both for the short term and the long term. I'll call, again, the first meeting, 68 attendees. The meeting we just had on February 12th, 39 attendees. We anticipate some leveling out of engagement just because we have the steering committee. So we're prioritizing agencies to show up at steering committee if they have a role at that level, and then other agencies to show up during the all call. But everyone is welcome. This is a public meeting. We want to make sure that the word gets out and that engagement is the highest it should be. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Schaefer to talk about working groups and regional action plans.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the City Council, members of the public. We knew as we were creating the long-term common agenda that we also needed to put some working groups and some regional action plans in play for the immediacy as well. But we don't want to run too far ahead of what the steering committee wants to come up with as well. So I'm going to discuss a little bit of the working groups that we are going to establish, that we know we're going to establish, and why. First one is Homeless Prevention Working Group, assessing and responding to the risks of homelessness for individuals and families. Because we know, looking at our point-in-time data and our HMIS data, that 70 to 80% of those who are experiencing homelessness as individuals in our city are county residents. So they are people who, we want to work on recidivism. And also talking with Kathleen Bowski from Transition House, 95% of their clients are Santa Barbara families, are Santa Barbara City families. So we have to put something in play to stop the bleeding and actually help people remain housed. And that could be we have a bunch of ideas. A working group will figure that out, but some level of flexible funding with case management and discovering who is at most risk, but also upping our supportive services so we make sure people maintain their housing. We also know that we need to work on a housing and shelter. We need a housing and shelter bed plan. We need to look at for our city, for our residents that are experiencing homelessness, how many shelter beds, how many units do we actually need? But it's not just the discovery of how many units, it's also engaging our neighborhood partners in the conversation before we start imposing new housing plans upon communities. That's something I'll cover a little bit in a minute about our discussions with the East Side and the Milpas region about housing issues. So both of those working groups are slated to start in April once we get more input from the steering committee, but those will be two very important groups that will kind of be the sandwich of which trying to help people into housing and try to keep people from becoming homeless will be working on kind of together. The Lived Experience Working Group. So you'll hear from us all the time that we are about reducing the impacts on the neighborhood, the businesses, and the individuals. So we also don't want to take all of our strategies on solving homelessness and just impose them on people experiencing homelessness. We want to make sure that people who have or are experiencing homelessness are involved in our leadership, in every one of our working groups, on our steering committee. So we will be establishing probably March 12th, our first initial lived experience working group, where we will invite people experiencing homelessness and people who formerly did to begin to develop a team that they want to. We will be helping to facilitate that group, but we won't be running that group. The people experiencing homelessness themselves will be running it, giving us information, as well as we can bring plans to them to see whether that sounds like that's something good that they would actually want. We want to be client-based as much as we can. So that'll start this month. Some of the regional action plans. So any region of the city where homelessness and the impacts of homelessness is a large issue. So whether you're talking about the library, the county administration building, the East Side, the beachfront, or State Street, no plan does not mean neutrality. If you have no plan to reduce homelessness, you're probably going to see an increase. So what we decided as our first regional action plan was to work on State Street. And we've created first we created a 60-day, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. We created a 60-day plan working with CityNet, the ambassadors, law enforcement, business community partners to look at reducing homelessness on 2 blocks over a certain amount of time. And now it's been expanded to the 400 to 700 blocks of State Street. And I'll speak to that a little bit more on a slide to come. We also started looking at, due to some of the ordinances that came up before the city, looking at the number of people on the streets that had a large amount of items they wanted to have stored. We started to look into the idea of how can we create storage space for some of these individuals. So we have pretty much a monthly Monday meeting where we're looking at that. We've already surveyed some of the individuals that have the large amounts of items that need to be stored to see whether it's something they're interested in, and for most of them it is. So now it's trying to figure out where is there a space that we might be able to do it, what nonprofit would like to host that, what kind of rules need to put in place for that to be successful. But we have a regular meeting now looking at how do we create storage space. The county administration building, for those of you who don't know, there are a good number of people experiencing homelessness that are now camped out there. On Tuesdays, the Behavioral Wellness and Home for Good host a South County home outreach group that's been meeting every Tuesday for a while now. We joined with them and invited the county to come to that meeting to develop a 100-day plan to try to assess that situation. 7 parts of that plan, we've accomplished 5. We have 2 more to go, which include a pop-up resource centers to try to get people into the coordinated entry system, get them lined up for housing and kind of gaining resources. We're also going to do a training for the county building employees. We eventually want to go to the east side Milpas region to start talking about what is a solution process we can put forward for the residents and the community there. There currently, as far as I know, there is no plan in place. But what we did is we worked with the Westmont Initiative for Public Dialogue and Deliberation, and they interviewed approximately 30 Eastside Milpas members, just interviewed them on how homelessness has affected them, has impacted them as a community. We did not push any solutions. We are continuing to work with Westmont, and we're going to have more rounds of deliberation because for us, our first step is involving the community in the solutions and in the talk about how they've been impacted, and then to bring providers around to them to start talking about what kind of ideas do they want to work with us on and work with you on to try to address homelessness in that region as well. These are some of the partners that are currently involved. You can see in all the wraps we currently have going on, similar government agencies, nonprofits, business partners, philanthropy, target population, faith communities, and community members. So we are trying to rally the assets that currently are there, as well as increase the capacity to do the work more effectively over time. Just to talk about the State Street work for a little bit. So basically, October and November, we did a 60-day pilot project looking at how do we reduce homelessness on 2 blocks. What SBAC's role is in the RAP is we run the meetings, we create the agendas, we keep the minutes, and we try to build the team. So we do outreach to business community members, and we try to bring everyone on board for the plan, communicate what we're trying to do, and get everyone as involved as we can, because we feel like that's the best way for better solutions. CityNet, Downtown Ambassadors, Behavioral Wellness, Law Enforcement, they've all been working together. So it's been a really amazing way to see the ambassadors primarily working with CityNet and AmeriCorps and Home for Good to work on solutions together. So the great thing is with State Street is we know data now from the ambassadors. We know there's approximately 120 people experiencing homelessness who frequent State. So the ambassadors have relationships of trust already, and when people are ready to get assistance, they can call on CityNet, and CityNet can jump in and begin to help them. So what we saw over 60 days was 41 unique contacts on those 2 blocks. 17 individuals became CityNet clients. 9 of those had what we call street exits, 6 permanent reunification or housing, and 3 temporary shelters, but none of those 9 have since returned to homelessness. So really, if you look at the numbers, again, it's a 60-day pilot project over it, but it's a 25% reduction. So what we learned from processes like that is that we need to have coordinated entry. We need to have a county-wide effort of coordinate everything. But what you really need so that folks feel like they can trust the system and re-engage is somebody that will talk to them 5, 6, 7, 8 times a week and build trust and take them incentive cards or coffee or whatever it is to build that trust and rapport. And then over time, people will accept services. And you have to have a team like CityNet they're going to work their tails off to help people no longer be homeless. We have a weekly check-in meeting that the whole community is invited to. We meet every We meet every Friday at 11 a.m. at Hotel Santa Barbara, and we have a check-in meeting. We don't talk about any clients' details, but we all work together on this work. So this is something we want to build capacity for. We want to cover all of state eventually. And then we want to look into, if we're successful there, how do we develop this on the beachfront? How do we develop this similar idea potentially on the east side? So the Funder Collaborative, we have an initial meeting scheduled for March 17th. So what that means is we're going to bring together funders to begin to look at what we see as from our common agenda and from the gaps we see as a city to develop both. We have funding that always comes from federal, state, city sources, but how do we also leverage some more flexible funding to meet immediate needs, to develop and build capacity for our work? So I think that's all that we have. Thank you for having us, and we're all available for any questions you might have.
Mr. Schaefer, can I ask Mr. Fieldhouse to come up and give some details on the program you did at the 400 and 500 block of State Street? That's an incredible success. 41 people went up. You found 41 people, and 17 were helped. Can you tell us just a little bit more? And that was a 1 month period, or?
Yeah, Madam Mayor and City Council. Brad Fieldhouse, I'm Executive Director of CityNet, and this is in lieu of my comment that I was going to make to support this process, so I'll take my 3 minutes now. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it was, in addition to the project, which is the Santa Barbara Connect Home project, which is a coalition, I'll identify those partners in a second, is we sort of, our primary focus of that is to focus on sort of high utilizers of emergency services. That's sort of 1A. 1B was to do some prioritized outreach around the city. We cannot be everywhere. We don't have the capacity to sort of respond everywhere. So what we did is we sort of, for a number of reasons, which involve some of our clients that we're focusing on, but also some of the business community members that we connected with, we sort of picked a 2-block section on State Street. We didn't necessarily publicize it. We just sort of kind of went to work. And so it was the entire block, not just the fronts, but sort of the entire blocks of the 400 and 500 block. We did it last October and November. We were pretty much out there on an ongoing basis, daily as much as possible. When we weren't working with other clients, we were out there working with business owners. And then the ambassadors, so this is a big shout out to the ambassadors, the red shirts on State Street. They were phenomenal. And they did a lot of referring. They're out there every day, 7 days a week, so that provided additional contacts. They did, in fact, many of the initial contacts. And so we identified 41 unique individuals. So over those 2 months, we identified 41 individuals who could have just been passing through one day, or where we bumped into them every day, and it's somewhere in between. And so of those, we sort of built the relationships, and sort of, as we've talked about many times from this podium, just that process of building trust to allow them to become a client of ours, which then gets them into the coordinated entry system. That process takes a minute in many cases to sort of rebuild that trust. As soon as they give us information, it becomes actionable data for us. So 17 of the 41 said, we're interested, can we work with you? Gave us some real personal information that allows us to privately kind of work on their behalf to navigate the system. And within those 2 months, we saw 9 street exits. 6 permanently, meaning there's a permanent resolution to their situation, assuming all things continue to go well, and 3 temporary. That's actually surprising. We were expecting not quite as many permanent, but that's kind of what happened. And we would meet every Friday with many business owners. SB Act facilitated that. We sort of linked that as part of this bigger conversation that we're talking about today, sort of on behalf of, so this is my thumbs up to the process that we're guiding here, but that was sort of a showing of, you know, I love to lend my voice to things that work. Collective impact works. I've seen it work in lots of other cities. It's working here. We're beginning. I'm on the steering committee. CityNet's a willing participant of the process, but specifically as it relates to what they call a RAP, a regional action plan. That's sort of what we saw over those focused times. We're continuing to work there. We've sort of extended our range, as you saw in one of those slides, through the 700 block. We have to be a little bit careful, but we are sort of tracking those same sort of numbers. Our caseload is going to grow, and we got to be careful that we don't get overextended. We want to make sure we stay focused on the task at hand. But just last thing, shout out for the collaborative. We're part of for the new council members specifically, we're part of the Santa Barbara Connect Home project. That's how we're funded as an agency. And in that, I want to make sure that, because we might be out on the streets a lot, we're the lead outreach agency, but there's a lot of resource we're bringing to bear because of the project that we're doing citywide. It's the city of Santa Barbara Santa Barbara Housing Authority, Santa Barbara Police Department, Santa Barbara Fire and Rescue, Cottage Hospital, and PATH. That's sort of what it means. So like within, we're bringing nurses from Cottage Hospital out on State Street as needed. So it's a little bit more than just CityNet blue shirts, hanging out with Ambassador red shirts. There's some resource behind that, as well as sort of the broader, collective team. So that's a long answer to your short question.
And as soon as you told your story about that success, there were calls for a red shirt program on Milpas Street. So, Mr. Casey, we might be coming to you during the budget season and talking about how do we fund that kind of success in other areas. And the other thing that you brought to the table was the idea of the storage spaces for people who have their belongings. Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon and I are participating in those Monday monthly meetings. And can you just give us a snippet of that program? You did it successfily in Anaheim?
I mean, one of the beautiful things about a process like what the SB Act is guiding, so I'm giving you my thumbs up to you guys, is that it surfaces what works, and it surfaces best practices. And then collectively, we can sort of kind of talk about that and how do we grow those or add those. One project we did is we partnered in a number of other cities down in Orange County, where CityNet also works, where we've actually partnered with churches and houses of worship to put containers on their parking lots that are not check-in centers. So there are places, that's another sort of vein of conversation of sort of these sort of check-in day center kind of things. But this is more of a case management storage site. So we partnered with a couple local congregations, that specifically 3 that have a storage container, and we use it as a case management tool. So in the case that, for example, those 17 individuals, if they have belongings that, as we put them in a permanent or a bridge situation, they can't take all their worldly belongings, we will store that for them for 90 days or as long as needed to make sure that they're not sort of leaving important stuff behind. So we sort of created some of those. So that's a solution we've thrown out on the table among many other good ideas to sort of say, as we wrestle with storage, that's an idea we've done in a number of places, and it has proved to be successful.
Thanks, Mr. Fieldhouse.
Yep, thank you.
I'll also point out that Oscar Gutierrez has been attending some of the meetings, so, and I would like you to back me up on the steering committee too, on those meetings. So, Mr. Jordan, this is time for questions. And we have another public comment speaker.
So I have a question that I'll get to, but I just want to put it in context. As a planning commissioner, 2 of the most frustrating situations I ever witnessed were both the Little Houses presentation at Louise Lowry and the presentation over on the east side at Franklin Center for the Salvation Army project. And I have my personal skew on your problem with those presentations collectively, but I think also the city erred in both of those, as we do sometimes, in not being there at that part of the process early on, even though it wasn't per se a project yet. And so kind of my outside of inside baseball look is, what can I do or what can we do to help you further? That's really my big picture question. This all just is really good, but it's like I say, it's inside baseball to people who are inside baseball. To somebody reading the news press at home on the Mesa every morning, hearing that it takes you 27 contacts to get the trust, they just don't fathom it. There's a role, I think, for the city to play a little more aggressively, and I really just want to hear what's on your top 5 list for the city to support this process.
So one avenue would be city council members are welcome to be on the working groups. So as we develop the housing shelter working group, you are welcome to join that as we begin the discussion with all the major housing providers and shelter providers that are currently tackling the issue. I think other things are, we do need to develop district education plans. So we do need to go, as providers, into district, start talking with neighborhood partners now before we start talking about actually housing. We need to look at where our current shelter beds and housing and how many are in each district and how can districts share the load. I think the other thing is I've pushed for providers. We had a presentation at the all-call meeting on the results. I can give you some of the results from the east side. But we cannot use language. So sometimes you'll hear language of people that, the concerned citizens, right, that have every right to be concerned. I was at a meeting around Hollister Lofts for the Housing Authority that they're going to do something on Goleta, and some of the folks that were in the meeting that were, used language about people experiencing homelessness that was inappropriate, calling them the worst of the worst. That kind of language doesn't help their case. But then our language, when we start to call people NIMBY just because they have concerns and we shut them down. So we have to work on our language when we have public meetings, and we need to be able to hear each other in dialogue and take seriously the concerns we hear from the community. I think that'll go a long way. And then I think we need to be absolutely clear about who we're moving in and what kind of supportive services we have in place. And there can't be anything left to question for misinformation sometimes to get out, because sometimes misinformation gets out or we don't give the right information, and so we lose at the forefront. So those would be some of the thoughts that I hope the Housing Shelter Working Group will look at, both the education plan as well as how many units we need, and be more successful.
So the only other thing that rises up for me that I'd like to hear what you think is just, you work most of this successfully, you still need a housing unit. So what else, what this is like the wonk coming back to haunt me, but what else can we do as a city to provide you an opportunity and a path to get to permanent or temporary supportive housing units in places where they would be acceptable?
Yeah,
I mean, if you want to do one down the street, do you want to go to HLC for 6 months? I mean, no, that's the wrong answer.
No. I think we need creative housing solutions. So there's even things like Home Share that was in Ventura,
okay,
where families that maybe are low on funds that have an extra room can find somebody who they live on SSI, but they can afford paying for rent. And then all you do is you do a background check to make sure if it's safe. There's a nonprofit who's done that, I believe. I looked at it years ago, and they were successfully doing 30 to 40 connections a year, right? So there's all kinds of different creative solutions from also scattered site, housing navigators, having more people housing navigate for people, so you don't just have to build, you need to find units. So again, I would hope that the working group would kind of take that all into mindset, right? That tiny houses, which should still be on the table. Yep. Things like that have worked in other communities. There's no reason why it can't be tackled again. And I know partners would love to do that. So,
right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thanks. Ms. Harmon, you had something to add, Mr. Sander?
And as we're creating the common agenda, I think that becomes really important. You saw from the partner interviews that one of the things that really rose to the top was a need for more shelter beds. And so when that gets created, when the working group comes together and says, this is actually our need, we'll probably be developing a plan, not only coming back to City Council, but approaching other agencies for funding and figuring out amongst all of the players, what can we do together to meet that need. One of the best parts of collective impact is that the solutions bubble up from the actual needs rather than us implementing what that may be. So, thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Harmon?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you so much for this presentation. I just have a couple of brief questions about the SB Act framework. I think certainly it may be that just working together toward a common goal is itself a measure of success, but I wonder if you guys could speak for just a moment or two about what long-term success looks like for SB Act in particular, and whether that definition comes from the work that you do with your stakeholders. Is it a living idea success for you guys? If you guys could speak to that, I would appreciate it.
Well, you have other collaborations. I think the biggest thing for the SB Act is that the organization and all we do is facilitate collective impact collaboration to support marginalized populations. So for us, the success in the collaboration, it's levels of engagement, it's actionable plans, it's accountability and commitment and achievement of those 100-day plans, 90-day plans, 60-day plans with the regional action groups. The working groups, again, will have their own actionable, timed plans, achievement of those. But if SB Act is seen ultimately as just the entity that creates effective collective impact collaboration in a variety of issues in our city and other parts of our communities, that's, I think, the goal. But
as executive director, do you want to add to that?
So, thank you, Barbara. I just wanted to give her a chance to speak more. We also run collective impact around different issues within the city. So we also have another collective impact collaborative around exploitation and trafficking for survivors. We also do another one for low-income West Side residents, specifically around healthcare. So we take in all of these social ills, we take the collective impact model and we get everybody working together. So ultimately, we want to work ourselves out of a job in something like this. We want to see that the issue is solved, and we want to see the needle move forward. So with homelessness, I think what's really exciting is that we're building all of this capacity to bring all of these agencies together to see that needle move forward and to see the work actually get done. That normally doesn't happen because of just the siloed kind of mentality of a lot of nonprofit agencies, and not because they're doing anything wrong, just because it's difficult to work together.
Thank you. That's very
Yeah.
helpful. My last question is, this framework seems so very well thought out, but are there opportunities for stakeholders if they're finding some, I don't want to say flaw in the process, but something that is not working for them or is not responsive really to their needs as the stakeholders and the providers? Is there capacity for them to comment to you all about maybe revising a working group or doing something differently? How living is this framework?
Very living. So actually, one of the parts of the common agenda is a plan for learning that says when things are going, as data gets collected, if we're not meeting the goals that we've necessarily put out, or if those goals are shifting as more data comes in, which is likely what we'll see, we then go back into the common agenda and start revising what needs to get done. So a lot of times when we talk about homelessness, it's about flow, about where people are at and how they get through that. We're going to start seeing if we address one area of flow, if another area comes up, we have a plan for learning to switch our priorities and respond appropriately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Friedman.
I think I just have one question. So there's another effort, the mayor's been involved with it, and myself and Councilman Oscar Gutierrez. It's the countywide collaborative on homelessness that's bringing together from throughout the entire county a lot of the same stakeholders. I was wondering what, if any, interactions or role does SB Act have with that countywide collaborative that's looking at these same issues at a larger scale?
Do you want to address?
Yeah, well, Jeff has experience working with the countywide collaborative before moving full-time with SB Act. But as you saw from our steering committee list, as well as the all-call partner organization list, the county is very much involved. And even during our first all-call meeting, the county presented HMIS and CES data to make sure that we're all aligned in terms of where our baseline is, how we're working together, how we're making sure that any achievement of getting people into housing, that we're all sharing that information with each other. So we attend COC meetings, we attend Home for Good meetings and collaboration meetings. For us, it's very critical that we're aligned and that we're working together in everything that we do. Even our guiding principles, Kimberly Albers from the county shared their guiding principles for the county collaboration, and there's much crossover there. So we want to make sure that we're addressing the impacts of homelessness specific to the city of Santa Barbara, but we don't want to be out of alignment with anything that's happening at the county level. So that partnership has gone really smoothly to date. Yeah.
Well, I see Lucille Boss in the audience. If she wants to come up and just give us a brief bit of information. My understanding, you went to the last meeting on my behalf. Thanks so much. The county is coordinating a way to get all the cities to pool their money together of the grant money that's coming from the state of California. Ms. Boss, thank you for letting me put you on the on the spot.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council members. So as far as the Phase 2 action plan, I think that's what you were referring to. SB Act has been really involved in the countywide collaboratives and efforts, so we certainly appreciate that partnership. We want to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts, so that's why we're working together, especially when data comes into play and reporting, engaging all of the partners. But as Barbara mentioned, it's great to have a city-specific focus as well. So focusing even on that 400 to 700 State Street block range, that's really helpful to have that city-specific perspective and efforts. But we're working to scale up as well countywide. And I do want to mention a couple of the the projects that Council Member Jordan mentioned, the Salvation Army and the tiny homes projects, those were both funding through HEAP, the Homeless Emergency Aid Program. So that's state funding that came through the county and then was awarded to various agencies. And something similar is coming. This time it's called HHAP. So we just applied for $4 million from the state to focus on countywide and through the county, and also the continuum of care funding. So we're looking forward to that NOFA ideally being released in the next couple of months. But we're really grateful for the partnership with SB Act and the other partner agencies that have been participating in the steering committee and also in the all-call meetings.
And the HHAP the goal is to locate another shelter in the county?
That is one of the goals, yes. So through all of the community stakeholder meetings that we did countywide, starting in late October, all the way through, the consultants are still doing some of the interviews because we want to make sure that we don't just stop that process, that it's ongoing. But part of it will be allocated to a crisis respite navigation center. The state has a very specific definition for a navigation center. But also to rental incentives, landlord incentives, and general outreach and coordination.
I thank the county for taking the lead on trying to get us all rowing in the same direction and not fighting and not competing for that grant money where we try to have a collective impact. So thanks for that, Ms. Voss. Any other questions before we go to Chuck Flax with PATH? Mr. Flax, come on up and let us know about your role in all of this.
Thank you for letting me speak, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. PATH is intimately involved in everything that's being discussed and will continue to be so. And I'm representing Tessa Madden Storms, who's my supervisor. She's our regional director for PATH in Santa Barbara. Couple of notes. So one of the things that we get dinged for is that we all get together and talk a lot and not a lot happens. And what I find particularly exciting about SB Act is that collective impact is really a different model. We tried to do it with C3H before, and where we fell down was when we were too reliant on, pardon me, elected officials and the funding that was directly coming from elected officials. And they wanted to see results. They wanted to see an answer and a solution and something done quickly. And there wasn't the level of trust and collaboration built that we've already started with at SB Act. So this isn't a top-down initiative. This is coming directly from the work that's happening. So regardless of whether you support it, I mean, I encourage you to support it. But regardless, the work's continuing. Jeff's been at this for a decade. He's taught me almost everything I know about homelessness, and I feel very excited at the partnership just represented here on the ground. With the support of the city, with the support of the county, this seems like a no-lose opportunity for all of us. But I really want to stress two things. Collective impact means patience on the part of public officials and trust in a process that I think ultimately will make your decision-making easier. So when the neighbors come forward with pitchforks or complaints or legitimate concerns, as Jeff was saying, we have an answer because we've worked with them. We've developed the proposals and projects collaboratively by working with them at the outset. And that's what I'm most excited about. The other thing that I just want to stress, I stress it in all opportunities, the only solution to homelessness is housing. That's what makes this so hard. It's very difficult to get anything built in Santa Barbara, as you all well know, as you hear day after day after day. But we won't solve this problem if we don't create more housing. And just as an example, Johnson Court, supported by this council, just opened. We, this week, put 7 homeless veterans out of PATH into Johnson Court. They're done. Homelessness is done for them. We put 2 more people into vacancies at Carrillo Apartments, another housing authority project. The housing authority can't be the only entity doing this. We need to support all the efforts that are happening because it works. It ends homelessness. So thank you.
All right, thank you. That closes public comment. And if there's any other comments from the council, Ms. Sneddon, then Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank you so much for these updates. I think when we first looked at this whole model and it was so new to us, and to get these updates and to see that you're making actual progress, which elected officials do like to see actual progress, I'm so hopeful that of the progress already that's happening, and that you're just getting started, and really focusing on the city, our local city residents who are experiencing homelessness, and you're getting to know them. And we've had this for a long time with the county, and we know there's funding sources in other areas, and we've been really you're filling in the missing gap. You are what has been missing, I think, for us, and bringing everybody together. And you've done it in such a collaborative way. Your steering committee is stellar. I mean, those are all people and organizations who've been working on this issue for such a long time and have cared so much about it. And then this is the opportunity to work together instead of against each other. And then combining that with CityNet and boots on the ground, and really our ambassadors are incredible resource for all of us. So this is, I think, I'm going to say for me, for the first time, feeling really hopeful that with all the communication that's happening instead of the silos, and moving forward and having the opportunity to see you in action with one of the sub-working groups, just really seeing how you honor those who are experiencing homelessness or have in the past, and the approach that you're taking with not imposing solutions, but growing the solutions. Very supportive, and I really appreciate these updates. Thank you.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So, Mr. Sandler, I could have jumped across there and given you a big hug when you said you'd like to work yourself out of a job. That obviously is a demographic complaint I hear frequently in my groups, and that people are just working and nothing's ever happening. It's just a job for life, and I appreciate you saying that. Mr. Schaefer, there's so many things you talked about that I so agree with. Back to, again, the tiny homes things. Mr. Fieldhouse was at that meeting. I had the pleasure of, you probably don't even remember, a couple of years ago, having lunch with you at the behest of Jay Higgins. I was impressed then, and the tiny homes meeting, he was relegated to sitting on his hands. The people from Cottage Hospital, absolutely no comment. And again, it was like insider baseball, just talking to a crowd of people who didn't get it, and didn't get in 20 years. That was the first time I'd seen anybody with kind of the method of CityNet and Cottage Hospital in the room with all the other usual providers. First time ever, and it still ended poorly. So that education plan, how it relates to, again, your middle-aged white person who just doesn't get why it takes so much to get people off the street, but is conversely is willing to complain about it every day, but not participate in the fix. So there's the quandary. It's grown past NIMBYism. The phrase we use in my house now is banana, and that's build absolutely nothing anywhere near anybody. So if you haven't heard that one yet, that's pretty much where we've gone to in some of these cases. And I would tell you that I'm personally interested. I've been dancing with Emily Allen. We haven't hooked up on the post-election kind of thing yet, but I'd be personally interested in playing with you guys in this sandbox. I'll have some personal time issues over the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks, but literally after that, this is a high focus area for me. I'm particularly interested in how the city participates early and strongly on behalf of projects or processes that end up in getting people off the street. Not necessarily in all the pretty pictures and the meetings and that kind of thing, but when it comes time that you've got the guy or the gal ready to get off the street, that there's a place to go. And I think the city has a disproportionate amount of influence and power that they can play at that particular point of time. You can bring all the other things and all the other strengths and involvements from all these other groups you want to, but I think we sometimes are probably our own worst enemy in the closure of that process, and we need to be a better helper. And then just last comment on advocacy. I think I heard that word several times. To me, advocacy is usually troublesome because it has to be advocacy that is embraced, not advocacy that is just your view. And that's the challenge. And that's where I hope to play a role personally and help you guys, because I'm not a big flag waver and marcher on this subject, or getting together at a bunch of meetings, or the thing that drives you guys to do this for a living, probably not for a very good living, but I think I can help translate how that passion and how that drive relates to the normal person. And I'm willing to help do that. So I'm looking forward to being involved, and thank you again. I think, again, this is like about the fourth iteration of the 10-year plan that I've seen in 30 years, but I agree that this keeps getting better. It's just unfortunate it takes so long to get better. And I think, again, I'm thankful that I'm in a position now that I think I can play a better role in that outcome. So thank you, Madam Mayor.
Good, sure. Ms. Gutierrez.
I just want to say it was such a, it's really amazing when we learn from our mistakes. And I represent District 1, and I was in the middle of my campaign with the whole mess of the Salvation Army. I walk through the Cacique Bridge every day. I live just a block away. I grew up in that area, so to hear you say that the communication and how you want to change the way we work together, especially for the folks in my district, it's so rewarding to hear that, and that you really watched how the whole thing developed and how it became a disaster because of the lack of information and how certain people really blew it up. But my district is not against, building housing for the homeless. It's just the lack of information. So it's really nice to hear that you guys are actually out in the community knocking on doors. And then I just wanted to remind you, don't forget the information in bilingual, both in Spanish and English. And I'm willing to help as well. And I'm really excited to see what's going to come out from this. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gutierrez. And my comments are to emphasize, if I may, the importance of our rental housing mediation program. It really is eviction prevention. And if you're talking about making sure people don't slip through the cracks, they do such a great job. And Andrea Buffano will pick up the phone and someone is due to be kicked out tomorrow or the next day. And she's a crisis manager. So anything that we can do on that eviction prevention, or what it was that first working group that you had, really an important function that we have at the city. Rebecca Bjork is not here. It's our Public Works Department that oversees the red shirts. And we've tried other ways. These community service officers, the restorative police, they did a good job. We had the yellow shirts, and they did a good job, but it's this red shirt, I think, that really hit the mark on being personable. And I was talking to one woman who, she had some sobriety. She was clean and sober herself. And so then when she went to the street, she was able to really communicate with people. At least not everyone has a substance abuse problem on the streets, but some do. And so here's a person who cares. And so anyway, I'm just complimenting whoever does the hiring of the red shirts, because they're doing a good job. And then I want to point out that Laura Doubles of Community Development is the staff person for this function. This is a city-funded program. Thank you, with Santa Barbara Foundation, so thank you. But Ms. Doubles would be, for my colleagues, if you have a hot spot or something to report, you can start with Ms. Doubles, and she does a great job too. And then you did invite our council members individually to get involved. So please send an email to Mr. Schaefer, say, hey, maybe I want to hold a meeting on the East Side. And as a city council member, you can use the East Side Library for no charge, right? Maybe I shouldn't open my mouth on that subject, but we have city resources, and this is what we should be using them for, is to hold community meetings and get people together on this subject. And we do need to do some of the work ourselves. Yeah, we don't just sit here on Tuesdays. We get some work done. So that's what I would say in closing. Ms. Gutierrez, your light's on? You just okay. So thank you. And Wednesday, so that's tomorrow, my goodness, the steering committee meeting. But the all-call meeting is the one where the public can come. I see a member of the media back there. Where are you going, Mr. Welsh? We're going to invite you to some of the meetings. Okay. So you let us know which ones are public, and we'll advertise them. We'll go ahead and close this item with thanks and a sense of hope. And we will move on to the next item. And I'd like to thank the people who've been sitting here all this time, the applicants for Planning Commission. So number 15, Ms. Clerk.
Item 15, Planning Commission applicant interviews and appointment.
Okay, so Mr. Jordan got elected to the Santa Barbara City Council, leaving a vacancy on the Planning Commission. Oh, Mr. Buell left. I thought we would just do like a real short description. Mr. Casey, why don't you tell us, what exactly does the Planning Commission do? Just he's back. Just for the public.
Planning Commission is in all deference to your other boards and commissions, one of the most important boards and commissions that you have in the city, in that they deal with planning matters both as a reviewing and approving body for specific types of projects that require Planning Commission approval, and also assisting you in the long-range planning for the community, working on policy work and general plan elements and other items. And so they're not only reviewing development projects, they're also setting the goals and policies for moving forward. It's a very heavy lift committee. We meets 3 times a month on Thursdays and often have very long engaged and very civic engaged meetings with a lot of public comment. So it's a very important role, and I appreciate everyone stepping up who wants to be on that commission.
And the special projects they do is like the local coastal plan. Do I have that right? And the zoning, or when we updated our zoning ordinance, that
Correct.
was a lot of meetings.
Correct, and certainly upcoming in the next year is a lot of housing policy. You've referred a lot of housing policy that is required under your municipal code to go to the Planning Commission first, for them to develop the policy and make a recommendation back to council about how to proceed. So that'll be a lot of heavy lifting coming up as well from the commission.
It's a lot of work, and so this is your chance to turn and run. Okay, and Mr. Jordan, you recommend it, right? You did it for such a long time. So I'm looking at how the names are laid out in our list. Ms. Gorman, they're not in alphabetical order. This must have been how the applications came in. Is that right?
Yes, I believe so, Madam Mayor.
Well, why don't we just take them in this order, and if someone comes in late, we'll just tack them on to the end. So how it works is we're going to have the applicants come up and give a presentation. You know, I'll run the clock at 3 minutes. That way you don't feel like you have to talk for 10. Some of you might be good at talking for 10 minutes, but we didn't give them a time frame. Did we tell them 5 minutes? Or I don't think so. So
A few minutes, Madam Mayor.
I'm sorry?
A few minutes.
A few minutes is what we said. So Alejandro Vela, are you here? Okay, well, we'll call him at the end. Brian Barnwell, I don't see him here. Barrett Reed, you're next. You get to go first. Ms. Reed, so you'll give us your presentation, and there may be questions from people. So be prepared for a game of Jeopardy. I'm kidding.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Madam
Go
Mayor,
ahead.
members of council, my name is Barrett Reed, and I've applied for the Planning Commission. Born and raised here. I live in the downtown area with my wife, my soon-to-be little boy. I work downtown, and I get to walk to work. I love Santa Barbara. When I was a boy growing up, my favorite thing to do was when my mom would take my sister and I to meet my dad. We'd go to Rudy's in Paseo Nuevo when he'd get off work, and then we would just walk around the downtown and look at the buildings. And my oldest memory is just that they were so beautiful. And reflecting on that now, I realize the planning, the intentionality, the vision that went into that. And ultimately, I think that impact largely came from what council did in forming the Planning Commission almost 100 years ago, back in 1923. And those were groups with tremendous vision. History says that Santa Barbara at the time had the greatest vision for what they wanted to be of any city in the United States of America. And that's the legacy of our town. My work, I do my work in real estate because of my love for Santa Barbara, but also because of the impact that our planning has had on me, even as a little kid. And I love that work because of it. And I'm not, of course, the only one who loves Santa Barbara. And on the topic of affordable housing, it breaks my heart that we have people who work here, who contribute to this city that we love, who absolutely struggle to live here. So I support a wise approach to affordable inclusionary housing with a vision for the future that absolutely takes into consideration the great vision from our past, which I think is a part of our general plan. And additionally, I have a fundamental respect for the leadership of Santa Barbara because I love this place. I'm not a divisive person. There are disagreements, but I choose to approach disagreements by first acknowledging support for what's common between anybody in any type of disagreement. And I believe I'm a consensus builder and I'm a collaborator. And lastly, I work. This is a position, as was just explained, it's a lot of work. And I'm willing and I'm able to commit the time to that work. I believe Planning Commission helps to carry forward the central values of this community. And that's guided by the general plan, that's guided by the zoning ordinance. And that's work that's important, that's work I am very passionate about, and work that I would be deeply honored to be a part of. I'm a good listener. I ask questions, and I'm prepared. I do the work, and in the context of such important issues coming through council and planning commission right now, I don't have to list them all, we know them. I think my experience, I would hope my experience and my qualities as a person could be a contribution to this city, to this commission. So, thank you.
Are there questions for Mr. Reed? Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will acknowledge that we met individually also,
Yeah.
so I had many of my questions answered earlier. Thank you.
Yeah.
But what do you see as our biggest issues facing Planning Commission right now and in the near term?
I would say workload. This AUD/ADU ordinance, objective design standards, sea level rise, which is only beginning. I think those are all things that you guys are considering that I think you will depend on the advice of Planning Commission. So that's a lot of work and commitment to really understand those issues. I have a lot of respect for the complexion of our Planning Commission, and they're people who are very capable of understanding issues as important as that. I think there is a divisive nature in our city right now. A lot of big stakeholders choose to remain critical, always focus on that, lead with that, and remain in that. So navigating that is important, so that it doesn't shut down our effectiveness. So, yeah.
And then just a follow-up question to that is, how do you see the relationship between the Planning Commission, HLC, ABR, and City Council? Like, how do you see that those all work together?
Highly interconnected. And I think just what I led with, we can learn a lot about what we're doing for the next 100 years from what was done about 100 years ago. HLC has a lot of incredible insight into that. And so that's worth exploring amongst every other committee and council.
And I guess I have one more question. This one's just specific to you. If you could just address any conflicts of interest you might have as a realtor.
So I've looked at every agenda item over the past 4+ years that's come through Planning Commission with pretty good detail, and with the advice of former city attorney Steve Wiley, I would have had 4 conflicts, and I would have had 4 conflicts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, my question is, the Planning Commission, we have an AUD program, and it has guidelines, and I want to know your experience applying guidelines to your decision-making. You've watched the meetings, I think, where the Planning Commissioner will describe the findings related to a decision. How would you make decisions, and how would you interpret or apply the guidelines that we have in place in our general plan?
Well, just that. I would apply the guidelines. I believe that Planning Commission's role is guided by the general plan and the zoning ordinance, and that's something I know well. I think that along the line there have been amendments to that to consider, and amendments still can be made, but that would be my primary guide. Our general plan and our zoning ordinance. And I'm a very open-minded person, so I'm not bringing strong idealism into this role. So I'd be pretty careful in my preparation and have as deep an understanding as I can and apply it.
Thank you. I don't see any other lights, Mr. Reed, so thanks for your time and presentation. Christine Piron, I don't see her in the audience. Daniel Branuelas. Elizabeth Kramer, I don't see her either. Eve Sanford. Where are people?
Madam Mayor, just to clarify, the list you have in front of you are people who applied for the December appointment process.
Oh, okay.
Since it was still an active list, we notified them and say they're still eligible if they wanted to come and interview today. And then you had maybe a handful of new applicants. And so I imagine a number of these are people who applied earlier and for whatever reason they're not interested at this point.
Thank you for that clarification then. James Carberry. Welcome, Mr. Carberry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, City Council. You just warned everybody out. They told us to be prepared by 2:30 to make a presentation. My name's Jim Carberry. I'm an architect in Santa Barbara. I, in private practice in the autumn of my career, and I have a little time now to spend in other agencies as like the Planning Commission. I've been a member of Santa Barbara County since 1963 when I got my Bachelor of Architecture degree from the University of Illinois, and at the same time got my commission in the Air Force. They sent me to Vandenberg Air Force Base, and the Air Force and all their great intelligence made me a missile engineer. And but after I figured out that system, they moved me on into planning in the Civil Engineering Squadron. So most of my time at Vandenberg has been in the planning department. As an architect and planner in Santa Barbara, I feel we can use my expertise to augment the existing experiences of the Planning Commission. I don't have any agenda for that commission. I'm known to be a problem solver and will review issues as they are presented. I feel the main issues coming up for the Planning Commission are affordable housing, associated parking problems that come with that. There's a lot of mandates coming down from the state that is going to be hard to realize, and how you're going to have to accommodate some of those mandates. And there's the issues coming up lately of climate change, and make sure that those areas have a good peer review before expensive decisions are made in that regard. We do have creative developers and architects in Santa Barbara that can get through some of these hurdles, and I think can design some great solutions. I know we talked about tiny homes, which I love, but you have to have land to put them on, and land is such the premium of all these solutions. I know I got to go by the Earl Warren showground. I said, oh, wow, look at all that wonderful land there that we could use, but it's the state owns it. But anyway, not to divert here, but I cannot say that I'm an expert on all the city planning commission's land use and guidelines, but I'll be interested to learn. I've learned that before, and I've been in the county. I've been on the Board of Architectural Review and chairman of that for 5 years in previous occupations. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, but thank you for your opportunity to present today.
Questions for Mr. Carberry? Go ahead, Ms. Nedden.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think you answered the first one about the biggest issues facing Planning Commission right now, but then how do you see the relationship among the Planning Commission, HLC, ABR, and City Council? How do we all relate to each other?
Well, they all do relate to each other, and I know when I was on the County Board of Architectural Review, the BAR as against the ABR, it's all a process. I hope sometimes that process can be accelerated to get through the process, but they're all interrelated, and they all have their own inputs, and they're all good ones.
Thank you.
Good. And how would you work with our general plan and our zoning ordinance in making your decisions?
Well, general plans and ordinances are the best thing you can come up with as a general thing, but there's so many things that it just doesn't address, and you have to think outside the box occasionally and be creative. And there's some other options that you have to look at that just aren't always covered by general plans and ordinances.
Mr. Carberry, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up, Matthew Lowe. Let me read the names so you can be prepared. So Matthew Lowe, Monica Martin, Michael Martz, Raina Stapleman, Robert Uli, and Terry Jory. Welcome, Mr. Lowe.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Matthew Lowe. I am blind, but I have a vision for Santa Barbara, and it's similar to many of yours. It is one of a vibrant community. It is one of an inclusive community. It is one that people can celebrate themselves and live a full, happy life, that those on the margins are included. Those are lifted up, given opportunity. We're celebrated. We're a joyful community that is here together. The Planning Commission has a vital role in that, and I believe I have skills that will be a key interest in making the Planning Commission effective, which I think is a key thing that is really hindering the Planning Commission at the moment, and we're really looking for it to be streamlined. I am personally a business owner, a nonprofit director, an entrepreneur, and I run a lot of community organizations in leadership positions. So I have my hands in a lot of different things in the community. So I understand a lot of different perspectives, and I understand what it means to implement things, implement change, to raise voices, to listen to voices, but then also to bring about a collective and collaborative solution. The Planning Commission at the moment has an architect on it, has previous city planners and elected officials on it, and has a general community member that speaks for the voice of the people. I believe I bring an aspect from my community development background as an essential voice for the Planning Commission. In community development, I was taught about asset-based planning, which allows the strengths and the resources of the community to come together. And this is vital for our community because at times in the Planning Commission, we are challenged with the voices of corporations and businesses, but also the public interest of our community. And at that point, we have to make a decision. And I believe the Planning Commission has a vital interest in doing public and private interest collaborations. And we really need both to work in a collaborative sense. And in my experience in working in business as an entrepreneur and in nonprofits, working on issues of housing, racial justice, immigration, homelessness, and many different things, including climate change, I understand what it means to collaborate and intersect those different perspectives. And in our community, I ride the buses and I hear the voices of the people and their experiences, and those that feel that they have been left out. And those voices, as we've heard earlier from SB Act, they need to be included in the leadership. And as I listen to those voices, I bring those voices to the table with the Planning Commission. As our nonprofit, Future Housing Communities, we focus on equitable housing, and so how we bring housing for all of the community, not just a particular interest of middle market or what particular AMA that we're looking at. And so how do we have housing that is equitable and that brings sustainable communities? And so we not only look at housing, but we look at sustainability and how we focus on climate sensitive issues, but then also how we look at racial segregation in our communities and how money is spent in our particular communities. And so we believe that is a vital interest. And as a potential Planning Commission member, I bring that to the table. And we look at the community for its strengths and resources. So I thank you for this opportunity to be here and to share my vision with you. And I believe our vision can be made stronger as we come together on this Planning Commission.
Thanks. Go ahead, Ms. Sneddon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. For completeness, I think you've answered what you think are the biggest issues with Planning Commission, but how do you see the interrelationship with Planning Commission, HLC, ABR, and also specifically with City Council?
Very good question. I met with the city planner, and we were talking over this issue and how the past of Santa Barbara, this history of Santa Barbara, is so rich. Just looking at the building and the architecture, the historic preservation, and the growth that Santa Barbara still has yet to go, and the housing opportunities that are here and that is needed. And something that I realized, and this is something that I've heard in other situations, is that Santa Barbara preserves its past in the sake of its future. And as somebody that embraces change, somebody that welcomes the adversity, and somebody that brings about collaboration, I think all those different entities are important and needed in our community. And we have architects on the Planning Commission already, people that listen to historic preservation that have been in this community a lot, like Sheila Lodge. Those are vital interests. And intersecting those as it is essential to do, is important to have a working relationship and understanding what their needs are and how they intersect with the true voice of the community. Each one has their perspective, but I think we need to get clear on what the community really wants. And it gets to sensitive issues like red tile roofs, and that really needs to be listened to on the community at large. And I think I bring that to the table of really listening to the whole community and getting them to show up.
Thank you so much.
And my question would be, have you observed the planning commissioners issue findings, legal findings on projects, and would you be comfortable doing that?
Yeah, I've worked with John Campanella in the past. We did a millennial housing coalition, and we've looked at many of the legal issues and the stipulations that go within that. I've also did a little bit of consulting with Hillside Housing for those with developmental disabilities and the different policies that are related to in the general plan, but then also within AUD, ADU, and all of the other things that the city is processing at the moment, and also what is coming down the pipe with state legislation that is getting passed down by Governor Brown. And so understanding the legal aspects, I think I'm pretty well versed in the development side of things. The legal aspects, I would probably turn to one of my colleagues for their insight and their opinion. But as far as it is as following municipal code, I think I'm pretty well versed in following municipal code and understanding what it says and how to implement change still and get people to come together so we can hear the voice of the people.
Thank you, Mr. Lowe. I don't see any other lights. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you.
And we'll call up Monica Martin. Welcome, Ms. Martin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Murillo and council members. My name is Monica Martin, and I am seeking appointment to the Planning Commission. I have a master's degree in urban and regional planning from Cal Poly Pomona and have over 5.5 years of planning experience in both the private sector and the public sector as a planner, including time spent as a planner for the County of Santa Barbara. I currently work as the associate planner for a civil engineering and planning firm in the city of Santa Barbara. I believe I offer a unique perspective on development within the city, in that I can speak both as a resident of the city as well as someone who can empathize with and support planning staff. In my planning experience, I have worked on projects across the board, from single-family residences and ADUs to multifamily residential developments. I have also worked on long-range planning solutions, such as writing zoning code amendments and specific plans. As a planner in the public sector, I took pride in taking the time to educate residents on the planning process and practices and assisted them through the development process to make their experience less daunting, as we know that sometimes the process can be. As a planning commissioner, I would bring the same initiative to the community by making it my priority to listen to the needs of the residents and collaborate with planning staff. If appointed, I will bring a fair and objective opinion to projects that are before me. I believe that development projects, such as housing, can complement Santa Barbara's character and natural beauty while also providing a community need. If appointed, I hope to bring my planning expertise and experience to this beautiful city that is also my home, and I think I would be able to present solutions to address challenges that may arise. Thank you so much for your consideration and your time. That concludes my presentation. I'm available to answer any questions.
Very good. Ms. Sneddon, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess I'll start first with the question. Are you still an active planner?
Yes, I am.
And how will you handle any conflicts? How often do projects from your firm or come before Planning Commission?
We do have some planning projects that do come in, but if there is a planning project from my firm, I would just recuse myself. It doesn't happen too often. We have a lot of projects that I work on personally with the county.
Okay, thank you. And then what do you see as the biggest issue facing Planning Commission?
Definitely housing mandates coming from the state. As a planner, you kind of have to work with keeping the character of the city while also providing this need of housing that the state is pushing down. So I think just with my experience as a planner, as planning staff, and writing zoning codes, I could provide that input from the Planning Commission on these zoning code updates that we would be seeing come to the dais.
Thank you. And then one more question is, how do you see the relationship between Planning Commission, HLC, ABR, and then also specifically in relationship to City Council?
I don't believe that any of these decision-making bodies work in a silo. Each development project that comes to the city has to be looked through all these different lenses. Santa Barbara's history is so rich. We have to preserve it. And, you know, the Spanish-style architecture that exists is also very predominant and I think needs to be preserved as well. So all of these entities definitely have to collaborate to make the best projects that Santa Barbara can have.
Thank you.
Mr. Friedman, go ahead.
Thank you. You worked as a Planner 3 for the County of Santa Barbara?
I did.
How long did you work at the county?
I worked there for 7 months.
And what types of projects did you work on there?
I was recruited to work on their cannabis team, so mostly just implementing the new cannabis ordinance.
And then I think you actually answered my other questions with Councilmember Stetton's questions, so thank you.
Thank you.
So then my question is applying findings and following the legalities to decision-making.
As planning staff, I'm very familiar with making findings and planning law. The planning law aspect also comes from my master's degree and taking classes on planning law. So I'm very familiar with everything that goes into making findings. As planning staff, as I'm sure you're aware, I had to write staff reports where I had to actually make the findings and then recommend that the Planning Commission adopt those findings. So I'm very well versed in being able to do that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Martin.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Martz. Raina Stapleman, I see you there. Thanks for waiting. You've been out there a long time, huh?
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and council members. As a resident and a homeowner in the city of Santa Barbara, I would like to put my experience and knowledge to use helping my community. I've been a planning commissioner in the past for the city of Goleta, 2010 to 2012, and felt I brought an important perspective to the body. I felt that we made very sound and good decisions, not always what I originally intend to, think at the beginning. But I think when you have different voices, the consensus is better and stronger because you're all looking at something not just from one perspective, but from many. Good planning takes many things into consideration. The general plan, California law, our environment, quality of life, economic prosperity, compatibility of projects, and balancing the public's concerns all come into play when making decisions. I bring a very well-rounded perspective to these issues as I've been a realtor here for the past 18 years. I understand the importance of the availability of homes and the impact that this has on our economy as well as our citizens. It is important that the people who work here are able to be a part of our community fabric. I also know that it is not an easy task balancing out all of these needs in a limited urban footprint. I would enjoy putting my talents towards helping find this important balance. I've been very active over the years, also with the Coastal Housing Coalition as one of their directors for 5 years, so I also know John Campanella quite well. Bringing education to the community, looking at what our options are. How do we create housing without disturbing our beautiful, beautiful Santa Barbara? And it isn't easy. And I think by doing what we are doing, by having meetings where all of the people who live here are invited to look, like there was one that I went to at the public library, looking at the downtown. Do you want more density there? Do you want it to be the Milpas corridor? And it was interesting because most people are like, no, let's keep it in the downtown area. Let's be a little more creative rather than pushing out into areas where it would probably have more of an impact. So I'm very, I see this day in and day out. I work with first-time home buyers. I work with people who are downsizing, upsizing. They have children, they have to move. It's just very fluid, but each brings a challenge. So I'd love to answer any questions.
Very good. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think you know what my questions will be. What do you see as the very biggest issue facing Planning Commission in the near future?
I would definitely say the creation of more living space for everyone. More so the moderate, lower income people, because that is so tough to create. It's not going to come from your general contractors who need to make money because they have to live too. So they're limited in how much they can produce within a certain amount of money. I see more coalitions coming together with, let's say, Housing Authority, St. Vincent's, Housing Trust Fund, corporations who are here, even in Goleta. bringing these people together and saying, we know we have a problem, and we need help to be able to create thoughtful and meaningful development.
And then, thank you. And then how do you see the interaction among Planning Commission, HLC, ABR, and also specifically their relationship to City Council?
They are all interconnected. Certainly each has a strength in one way or another, looking at historical homes, looking at what style is this? Is this within the fabric of that little enclave? And yet, you tie it all together because that is what makes the fabric of our city so unique and so important.
Thank you.
And I know you've served on a planning commission before. Could you just describe your decision-making process in applying findings? Making findings?
What we would do is we would be given an opportunity many times to go on site. Most of the things that were brought to us were actual buildings, construction, Cottage Hospital in Goleta, it's the building next to it where they have like the surgery center. So doctors have offices that also have surgery units inside of them. So all of these, the roundabouts on Hollister Avenue, which have not occurred yet, looking at San Jose Creek and redoing that, which was so important to the infrastructure in order to do anything in downtown Goleta. That was the one thing that had to happen first. So all of these things, there was a lot of reading, which I love because it really gives you a good sense of, okay, all of the ins and outs. What kind of impact could this have? Going there, looking at it, asking questions, of course, of the company or people who were actually building, and just really digging down to get to every question that could become a worry. There was actually one case where the city had decided that they would like to change a zoning area in Goleta, and they said, well, it should be single family, but we would like to see multi-use. So on the bottom floor, you would have a commercial space, and then up above, living space. And it was interesting because it was like, this was not what was in the general plan, because that is really key to deciding, is this something that should happen? And so all of us, it was very interesting. We're like, well, if our city attorney says that this is okay, we're fine with it. But if it's not, then we don't think that it's something that, and they said, no, it's definitely, they were all talking, and it ended up years later, big lawsuit. So it's important to know that you may try and make your best decision, but you do have to base it on other professionals within the city. The planning, the planners, the attorney, it is the city manager. Everybody has their input, and so I find all of that very important as well. And I would listen to what they have to say, because many times they really know much more than I do, because that really isn't, my professional job. So it was a very interesting, and there was one other one that was memorable. It was a building that was also a multi-use, downstairs commercial, upstairs 4 units, and several of the planning commissioners didn't want to allow it because the height was, I believe it was like a foot or a foot and a half too high than what the height restrictions were. And, I looked at it and I said, but I don't see how you can say no, because the reason why the additional height was required was for an elevator shaft. And ADA regulations, you have to have an elevator going from the first floor up to the second if it's living space. And so everyone thought about it, and they were like, okay. And it did pass, but because of that. So I really look outside to see why, why is this important? And then it was like, that's ADA regulation. So I really try and wrap my head around each individual thing as best I can to, form my opinion, but of course listening to everyone else's input.
Thanks so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. Robert Uli, are you here? And Terry Jory is not here, but we have someone speaking on her behalf. We'll go to public comment then. Ms. Josie Donnelly, come up. We're happy to listen, but unfortunately, if Ms. Jory didn't come to interview, we can't appoint her. But please sing her praises if that's what you're going to do.
Okay. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, distinguished council members, and Mr. Casey. I'm Josie Donnelly. I will be reading a statement from Terry Jory, who's applying for the open seat on the Planning Commission. I have not read it myself, but I have been told that it does not state explicitly in the city charter that absence of presence here means that she will not be considered for this spot. So this is just me speaking on her behalf. She was given permission to see her son today, who's on active duty in the Army, graduating as an officer in the 101st Airborne. And after today, she will not have communication with her son for 2 to 5 months. So thank you. The policies we make and the decisions we take in 2020 will shape Santa Barbara for years to come. I love our city, and I pledge to bring my passion in working assiduously to make Santa Barbara an even better community for the families who reside here and for those who work in our city. As a PhD holder, I consider myself to be a policy geek who relishes curling up at night and reading dry policy missives that would put most people to sleep. I will study the issues from both sides, always be prepared, and bring a collaborative and thoughtful dialogue to the Planning Commission. I'm committed to fostering a collegial and productive environment, working closely with Planning Commissioners, City Council members, staff, as well as respectful listening and engagement with the public. Together, we can successfully implement the sustainability framework outlined in the city's general plan. We can achieve a reasonable balance between the needs of current and future residents while preserving our neighborhoods, the spirit that makes our city so special, and the environment. I'm excited about taking on these challenges in a sustainable and resilient manner. To ensure Santa Barbara's future as a thriving and vibrant community, we will need to work hard to attract and sustain a diversity of voices and incomes. A community cannot just be a haven for the haves. Our workers and working families will need to have access to affordable housing. This will then create a greater vibrancy in our economy as families raise their children and young people have a pathway to make Santa Barbara their home. The RHNA data demonstrates the deficiency in affordable housing in Santa Barbara, showing total units built for those with very low, low, and moderate incomes combined of only 206 units, compared to the above moderate levels of 811 units built. We will need to begin to implement the vision from the general plan more expeditiously, with calls for future growth. 2030 will be carefully managed with priority given to the development of affordable housing. With the city knowing what type of housing is needed and the state of California mandating the acceleration of multi-housing units with SB 330, it would be my honor to help address our housing crisis as well as many other important issues by serving the city of Santa Barbara on the Planning Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll close public comment. And Ms. Gorman, if my notes are correct, there's 5 people that have fulfilled all of our obligations: Reed, Carberry, Lowe, Martin, and Stapleman.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So we'll handle this like we do all of our advisory board appointments. Someone may nominate, and we vote for one, only one spot. But I guess I do want to say thank you to everyone who came out. This is going to be a tough decision, and if you don't get appointed this time, people are always cycling off the Planning Commission, and maybe next time. But I just wanted to thank you. What a great bunch of people that came up today, obviously caring about our city and caring about planning. So nominations are open. Ms. Harmon?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Reed.
Okay, Reed. Are there any other nominations? Mr. Gutierrez?
I'd like to nominate Ms. Martin.
We have two nominees, Reed and Martin. So, Ms. Clerk, will you do your thing?
So, Council, I will state your name, and you may state whether you are casting your vote for Mr. Reed or Ms. Martin. Good. Councilmember Jordan.
Reed.
Councilmember Alejandro Gutierrez.
Reed.
Mayor Pro Tem Stanton.
Reed.
Councilmember Friedman.
Reed.
Councilmember Harmon.
Reed.
Councilmember Oscar Gutierrez.
Martin.
And Mayor Maria.
Reed. So that's 6-1. Mr. Reed, congratulations. When does he start, Mr. Ms. Gorman? And thank you, Ms. Martin, and everyone else who applied. Ms. Gorman?
And Madam Mayor and Council and Mr. Reed, you may come to our office and we'll get you sworn in.
Okay, so tomorrow morning?
Not now.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Jordan, go ahead.
I'm sorry, forgot our last name walked out. So I'll just tell you, I would echo, as the newest person sitting here, and somebody who, let me look for a second, as the only person sitting here who came out of a board or commission, I would like to echo the mayor's enthusiasm on not giving up after the first time. I will tell you, I applied for the Planning Commission 3 times before I was selected. So don't go away. There was a good amount of talent there, and believe her when she says that please try again. There is always a role for interested people in our city hierarchy. Thanks.
Thank you. So we'll close this item with thanks to everyone, and there's still more to our agenda. Number 15 is closed. Thank you. And committee assignment reports. So we didn't have a city council meeting last week, so maybe we have 2 weeks of stuff to report. Mr. Jordan, go ahead and start.
So not that I haven't, well, I guess I haven't really popped up lately, but I have been doing some meet and greets after election, and these are a couple of them, but I attended the Chamber Business Leaders Luncheon and met a great group of people there. Also attended the Navy League's presentation, I want to say last Wednesday, on the construction process of the USS Santa Barbara, which is a kind of a Batwing new development stealth boat ship that is not really a large ship. The Navy League is sponsoring that, had a great reception and educational presentation on the ship and all its components, and they're hoping to be here, I think, early in 2021 for a christening, which will be kind of cool. A ship named after our city, and do the christening here. One of my meet and greets around town was last weekend with the management team of Metropolitan Transit District, and the only reason I really mention that is that the point was made to me that one of the non-positive benefits of the coming census would be that they're projecting us to grow out of a category of a city size, which lessens our availability for funding from the federal government. So whatever it is, it's maybe 100,000 people, we're going to get just past that, or it's 90 or whatever it is. And the challenge that they'll have, they're anticipating that's probably a $2 million hit per year. And that comes on the heels also of the requirement, that comes on the heels of their push to move towards renewable energy vehicles, which take up more space and paraphernalia in their storage than just abutting buses up out in the open. They all had to have a bay with a plug-in and sit there overnight. So there's probably some challenges coming from MTD, and I'm looking forward to playing a role, and as I'm sure we all are, to meet those challenges. Then had a great, I think as some of you others did, had a great about 45-minute meeting downtown with Representative Carbajal, who I thought was really nice. He reached out to me. I didn't reach out to him. His staff reached out to me, and I met with him and one of his field representatives to basically just for Salud to hear from me what I thought was going on in my world of city government and what he could do to support us, and just to start that engagement and chat going back and forth, and I really appreciate it. And then we had the monthly Our Mesa Neighborhood Association meeting last week, and that's about it.
Well, that was a lot. Ms. Snedden.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I attended also with Councilmember Friedman the Community Wildfire Protection Plan workshop. There is an introduction to the process and the timeline, and a really strong invitation to the community to become involved. They really emphasize it's a community plan. Amber Anderson gave a really great presentation, and Fire Marshal Joe Poirier and Liliana Encinas was there, Rosie Deisty, Jessica Metzger, very good city representation, also with our partners, Dudek and others. I attended the grand reopening of Mosaic Locale, and it was really exciting to see it so vibrant and hopping and very active space, and successful pop-up turned long-term collaborative that was really successful.
Gourmet donuts?
Gourmet donuts.
Oh,
I
man.
had one, and gourmet coffee, and I didn't have the beer, but I heard it was also gourmet. Attended Creeks Committee, their storm monitoring, Andre Clark Bird Refuge. Unfortunately, haven't really had any new storms to be able to really test that out. So starting already to look at drought recovery and groundwater basins, and that's a slow recovery. And good news, we were not on a beach bummer list this year. So cleaner creeks, cleaner oceans. Water Commission meeting, representatives from COMB came and gave really excellent presentation on what it is COMB is and our partnership with COMB. And so that's a good reference meeting for anybody interested in what COMB does and who the staff members are, who we work with. And that was at the Water Commission meeting. I did attend this Teen Star finalist show at the Arlington. I had no idea that was such a well-attended event and really exciting. And congratulations to Andy Bronstad, who's our winner. Also attended a COMB meeting. Big news on that is the infrastructure improvement plan that we're working on and moving forward. It's $8 million over 5 years, and as member agencies, we're paying into that also and seeing the benefits of that. And it's really all of the infrastructure improvements towards resiliency, risk assessment, and then just maintaining our quality water service. So also monitoring of the water quality, algal blooms, things like that. And just to note, it was the driest 2 months on record in Kachuma history. So we're already back on cycle of looking at emergency pumping facilities and secured pipeline, and we're already back in those conversations again. There are a lot of fish hatching. I know you're concerned about the fish, but it's a little too early. So if there is a storm, all those fresh hatchlings may not make it. I also met with Salud Carbajal and with similar type of conversation, just what our offices can do with the city collaboration.
And you mentioned the Community Wildfire Protection Plan workshop. For those of us who missed it on February 20th, there's another one on April 16th. And we'll try to announce that ahead of time to give people a chance to go. Ms. Gutierrez?
I attended the Johnson Court grand opening celebration. It's on, yeah. And it was my first ribbon cutting, so it was a really great experience, but it's such a gift to the community as well, and to the veterans that are going to take advantage of it. So it was a beautiful ceremony.
Thank you. Mr. Friedman.
So I attended the Wildfire Community Plan Kickoff. Also attended this month SBCAG, the Airport Commission, the Coastal Cities Group had our monthly conference call regarding statewide coastal issues and try to have a better collaboration with the Coastal Commission and our Sacramento legislators. Santa Barbara Beautiful monthly meeting. I went and visited Valley Verde Retirement Home and Vista Del Monte Retirement Homes and spoke with the residents there just about city issues and did Q&A. They were both very engaged, a lot of good questions. An MTD tour with Executive Director Jerry Estrada and Hillary Blackerby and learned about the challenges MDD is facing. And got invited to do to join a tour of the Tahigas Resource Recovery Project. It's quite an amazing project that's there, and it's one of those things where you can really wonder how someone could even design it and build it. It's that complex, but it's we, my colleagues here, made the right decision, and I'm sure there'll be tours coming up for it, and it's quite an amazing facility. And also attended the Fighting Back Youth Mentor Program through the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse, their annual gratitude luncheon. It's a great event and supporting mentoring in our community. It's one of my favorite events of the year. And congratulations to the Fighting Back Mentor Program and this year's recipients.
Mr. Oscar Gutierrez.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So some of the meetings I attended were the SB Act homelessness meeting at the library, which they covered pretty thoroughly of all their efforts that they're doing. I attended the Science and Engineering Council luncheon, and they spoke about 2D technology. I attended the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce ribbon cutting. I met with members of the Eagles Lodge about issues that they had with permitting. I just want to give a shout out to the staff that showed up. They really dealt with it professionally, and there were a lot of high emotions going on, but they kept their composure, and it was really impressive. Let's see. I attended the Johnson Court ribbon cutting, which was really great. Met with Salud Carbajal, got to talk to him about a lot of issues, so that was really nice of him. Took a tour of the water resource facilities. Mr. Joshua, was it? Hagmark? Yeah, great guy. Really went over everything in great detail. He said he was even open to allowing other resource centers from our sister cities to come tour the facility so they could exchange notes. So that was pretty exciting. Miss Megan Harmon was with us as well, so that was a fun trip. And attended the Visit Santa Barbara monthly meeting. Got to see some of the new video ads, so those are going to be pretty exciting to see. Yeah, and met with the residents from Oriba Way. Attended the Arts Advisory Council meeting. That was great. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Mr. Friedman, you had something else to add?
Sorry, I had one, and it was one of the most informative, and it was a great event, was the League of Women Voters put on a forum at the Faulkner Room for the 100th, celebrating the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage and the right to vote, and passage of the 19th Amendment. And in particular, it was such a big event. They had the current U.S. League President, Chris Carson, come out and introduced the keynote speaker, who was Carolyn Jefferson Jenkins, who was the first African-American woman president of the U.S. League, so the former league president. And she came out and gave a very moving and very important discussion on the passage of the 19th Amendment, but also how in terms of rights for women to vote, that there was a lot of history, in particular with women of color who still had, beyond that, had to fight in addition for their rights to vote. And she gave a very detailed history of those who continued that movement and a lot of background. And it was a very informative discussion, and it got a lot of people talking about issues that are important to our community and the right to vote. And so thank you to the League for putting that on, and to both presidents of the U.S. League for coming out and speaking at that for this event.
Thank you. I attended the SB-CAG sub-regional meeting where we talked about the census, and we'll have a census presentation here in Chambers. And we also continued the funding for the peak hour train service. I attended the Domestic Violence Solutions Luncheon, also Johnson Court. Opera Santa Barbara had an event. I'll put in a plug for Il Postino, March 7th and 8th. And of course, the SB Act all-call meeting. It's good that we had the SB Act presentation today. That was good. So that's it for our reports, but we have closed sessions. Ms. Clerk, number 16 and 17, we're going forward with both of those? Okay, go ahead.
Item 16, conference with labor negotiator as described in agenda item 16. And agenda item 17, conference with city attorney, existing litigation, government code section 54956.9 D1 as described in agenda item number 17.
And do you think we'll be reporting out, Mr. Kalan?
There is a possibility on item 17.
And okay, thank you. So we're adjourned to closed session. Thank you. We'll call this meeting of the Santa Barbara City Council back to order. We've come out of closed session. Ms. Gorman, can you read the item number 17, please?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Item 17, conference with city attorney, existing litigation, government code section 54956.9 D1 as described in agenda item 17.
Mr. Kalan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have a report out from the closed session. The City Council voted on a motion by Councilmember Friedman, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Sneddon, 4-2, with Councilmembers Harmon and Jordan voting no, and Councilmember Alejandra Gutierrez absent, to initiate an appeal in the case Felke versus City of Santa Barbara.
Thank you, Mr. Kalan. We'll adjourn this meeting.